to WebEx using the same name you used to sign up for testimony. Board staff will call on you in the order in which you signed up to present oral testimony. Board staff will unmute your mic. Please test your speakers and microphone before your name is called to ensure that they are working. Instructions on how to do so can be found on the board's website. If you are not audible because of technical issues, you will be muted and the next testifier will be called. Testifiers will have a 3-minute time limit. Our agenda states that testifiers have 4 minutes, but I have the discretion to adjust the testimony time. We have 19 people signed up to testify, so I've set the testimony time for 3 minutes. I have done this so that we can hear from everyone who signed up, and people will not have to wait so long to testify, and that the board will still have time to discuss testimony and take action. I respectfully ask for your understanding. When you are testifying, please state your name, your organization, if applicable, and the agenda item you are testifying on. A chime will sound when you have 30 seconds left, and a second chime when your testimony time expires. You will be automatically muted once your allotted time expires. So I will ask staff to call on testifiers one by one.
We have Randy Pereira, followed by Mike Landis, and then Randy Pereira, followed by Christine Russo, and then Mike Landis. Randy Pereira, Executive Director, Hawaii Government Employees Association, President, Hawaii State AFL-CIO, Vice President, AFSCME International. Randy, can you hear me?
Hello, this is Deborah Kagawa Yogi, Deputy Executive Director of HGEA, testifying on behalf of Randy Pereira.
Mahalo. Your testimony time begins now.
3 months ago, HGEA submitted testimony to the board regarding the DOE's COVID-19 guidance for school. The issue we raised then was the DOE's failure to consult with HGEA on the health and safety guidance they released that morning. Here we are 3 months later with the DOE announcing their furlough plan to employees via an email sent at 9 o'clock Monday night to unilaterally impose furloughs. Many employees woke up the next morning to hear of the DOE's furlough plans on the local morning news. Furloughs are a mandatory subject of collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is a protected constitutional right of all public employees. The DOE never informed HGEA of its furlough plan and never made any attempt to negotiate the furlough plan with HGEA prior to announcing it to affected employees. To make matters worse, Superintendent Kishimoto lied in the memo she sent to all DOE employees announcing the furlough plan, stating that, quote, the department's furlough implementation plans were shared with the Hawaii Government Employees Association in a good faith effort to mitigate the impact on all employees, close quote. That is a blatant lie. HGEA learned about the DOE's furlough plan from affected members. As the exclusive representative of over 7,000 DOE employees, the DOE is in violation of HRS Chapter 89 and the collective bargaining agreements for unilaterally implementing furloughs without negotiations and mutual agreement. 3 months ago, we questioned the DOE's leadership's commitment to engage in good faith bargaining with HGEA and expressed to you that these are words without meaning and how difficult it is to build trust under these circumstances. Our Unit 6 negotiations team has yet to receive a response to their proposal for midterm bargaining, which was transmitted to the DOE in August. In the board's June 18, 2020 resolution, the board authorized midterm bargaining to identify and negotiate any changes, exemptions, or modifications to the Unit 6 collective bargaining agreement as determined necessary for the reopening of public schools for the 2020-21 school year amid the COVID-19 global pandemic. Here we are at the end of the first semester with no response to our educational officers who have carried the overwhelming burden of the reopening of public schools on their shoulders. This testimony serves as notice to the Board of Education that the HGEA will take all necessary action and seek all appropriate relief to address the DOE's unilateral implementation of furloughs that were never negotiated with HGEA and are in clear violation of existing collective bargaining agreements and laws. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Christine Russo, followed by Mike Landis. Christine, can you hear me? Christine Russo?
Yes, hello. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Christine, please proceed.
Okay, aloha, Chair Payne and members of the board. Mahalo for this opportunity to testify. My name is Christine Russo and I'm a teacher at James Campbell High School. Before I testify on item 5B, I wanted to bring something to the board's attention regarding state assessments and request this to be put on a future Board of Ed agenda for discussion. Right now, schools on a block schedule, such as Campbell High School, are bringing students back for state assessments. For example, I teach biology and my students were asked to return to campus to take the end of course exam. I understand that states were denied a waiver on state testing by the federal government. Sorry, my computer is freezing up on me. One moment, please. I understand that states were denied a waiver on state testing by the federal government for the 2020 to 2021 school year and that schools are expected to conduct testing. However, my concern is that asking parents to have their child physically return to campus during this pandemic is in direct conflict with the Board of Education resolution passed in June that states in lines 174 through 177 that the Department of Education should provide clear guidance to families that allow parents or guardians who do not feel comfortable sending their children to a school campus to keep their children at home. The letter on state testing that was sent to families did not provide clear guidance to those parents and guardians who do not feel comfortable physically sending their child back to school on how to go about opting out of or rescheduling the test. Many parents do not understand the nature of these tests and think that if their child doesn't participate, they may fail their classes or not progress to the next grade level. Thus, parents who are uncomfortable sending their child back may have been put in a position where they felt they had no choice. I wanted to bring this to the board's attention so that going forward, clear guidance will be provided to families who do not wish to have their child physically return to campus during this pandemic for testing or any other reason. And I'll now testify on item 5B. I'm extremely concerned about the state's plan to implement furloughs on teachers. The consequences of these furloughs will have long-lasting and dire implications on the future of public education. Prior to the pandemic, there were already alarm bells sounding on the state of public education in Hawaii as schools struggled to recruit and retain qualified educators. To further squeeze what has already been a barren landscape will create irreparable harm to our keiki and the future of Hawaii's economy. One of the reasons we're in this mess is our reliance on tourism to float our economy, and we've put too many eggs in one basket, and therefore we're suffering from that. How can we diversify our economy and create a sustainable and strong workforce with graduates that do not have the skills to contribute to it? Providing our students with access to a high quality education is the best way for us to prepare a highly skilled and well-trained workforce with professional and technical workers to grow our economy and move away from an Mahalo.
Mike Landis, followed by Rebecca Hadley Schlosser. Mike, can you hear me? Mike Landis. Mike Landis.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Mike, I can. Please proceed.
Aloha board members. My name is Mike Landis, and I'm a social studies teacher at Lahainaluna High School. I'm speaking as an individual today about agenda item 5B regarding furloughs. My wife Megan and I have taught here for the past 17 years. When Governors Lingle and Abercrombie chose to balance the state's budget on the backs of teachers and other state employees. Sorry, there's some background noise. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. When Governors Lingle and Abercrombie chose to balance the state's budget on the backs of teachers and other state employees, those choices meant double pay cuts for my family. We were forced to rely on credit cards and second and third jobs to keep our family afloat. When the economy rebounded and those furloughs and DILWOPs ended, our debt remained. 10 years later, we are finally getting close to breaking free from that debt because we continue to have after-school employment, because we have taken every PD course we can to move ourselves up the pay scale, and because we now receive differentials for working in hard-to-staff schools, all while also volunteering our time to serve in leadership roles in local educational and community organizations. We continue to teach here because we love our students, our schools, and our community, but love does not pay the bills or feed our children. And I don't know that we can survive another decade of new and even more crippling debt. It hurts to think of this as a real possibility, but at some point we have to think about the needs of our family. If our employer will not value us, maybe we need to find a different employer who will. And to think, all of this comes at a time when the governor, the Department of Education, and this very board have been expressing concern about the students' needs for in-person instruction. As a result, more students are being pushed back into classrooms. And so now is when we get furloughed? I would love to know how anybody thinks that this will help the educational situation for our keiki. And I'd really love to know how anybody thinks furloughs will help the economy. As a social studies teacher, it saddens me to think that people in positions of power must have slept through their high school economics lessons. FDR did not get us out of the Great Depression by cutting government spending. He did the opposite. When times are tough, we need to keep public services and keep people employed and paid so that those people can spend money at local businesses and stimulate the economy. Cutting the pay of public workers results in even greater economic losses. Please do the right thing for our teachers, our keiki, our communities, and our economy, and help us avoid these disastrous furloughs. Thank you for your time.
Rebecca Hadley Schlosser, followed by Corey Rosenlee. Rebecca, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. Please proceed.
Hey, good afternoon, Chairperson Payne and members of the Board of Education. I'm Rebecca Hadley Schlosser, a special education teacher at Nani Kona Elementary School and a proud member of the Hawaii State Teachers Association. I am testifying on discussion item 5B regarding Department of Education furloughs. I am in my 24th year of teaching in Hawaii and have lived through the previous furloughs and imposed contract. I am still recovering financially from those. The furloughs we are now having imposed on us will mean further financial hits to me. I have struggled to pay down my student loan debt, and pay cuts will result in the need to ask for another forbearance because I will not be able to pay my student loans and cover the bills at my home. My boyfriend and I are the ones paying the bills for a household of 4. My son lost his job due to COVID-19, and his fiance is in school, so neither one of them is working at the present time. Unfortunately, there are also teachers who are either leaving after tomorrow or are considering leaving at the end of the school year as a result of these furloughs. In a state where we're told we're essential workers, having that turned around to tell us we aren't as essential as previously thought through being handed furloughs and a pay cut is a slap in the face and has made me even consider my options to leave the state. In prior years, I've taken on other jobs in order to make ends meet. At one point, I had 5 jobs. If I have to take on additional jobs, again, it will result in me being less effective as a teacher. I must balance the needs of my students with the needs of my family and decide which is the greater need. On Monday evening, we received an email from Superintendent Kishimoto informing us of the dates selected for our furloughs. The first date is January 4th, which is the day between semesters. I've been out on medical leave for 2 weeks now as a result of falling in my classroom. I had planned on using that day to review what my subs had been able to accomplish over the 2 weeks so that I would know where to start on the 6th when our students return. I was also going to get furniture rearranged to accommodate 2 additional face-to-face students in my classroom. I'm going from 8 students to 10 in a small classroom. A lot of secondary teachers are now going to have to face new face-to-face students start in their classes on January 5th. They now have no time to set up their class or prepare for these new students with the loss of the day on January 4th. This will result in the first day of confusion and possible chaos for those classrooms because the teacher will not be able to get the room set up for those students. I understand that we are in a crisis in this state. We are working harder than we have ever before to meet the needs of our students. However, it is time for the state to stop balancing the budget on the backs of teachers and other public employees. Please do what you can to stop these furloughs, or we're going to see a mass exodus of teachers, exacerbating the already high teacher attrition rate. Thank you.
Corey Rosenlee, followed by Sierra Mahin and Ty Baird. Corey Rosenlee, President, HSTA. Corey, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Corey, you have extreme feedback right now.
Okay, let me turn it down. Can you hear me?
Yeah, still a little bit of feedback there. Let's try one more time. Testing 1, 2, 3. Corey, 1, 2, 3.
Can you hear me?
Ooh, lot of feedback, Corey.
Can you hear me, Gina?
Yes, I can. That's much better,
Okay,
Corey.
good.
Thank you. Please
Okay.
proceed.
Thank you so much. Chair Payne, members of the Board of Education, good afternoon. I want to thank Chair Payne for putting furloughs on the agenda so we have a chance to discuss it. The Hawaii State Teachers Association requests that the Board of Education stand with our keiki and write a letter urging Governor David Ige to prevent these destructive furloughs and protect public education funding. We have seen the ramifications of these recession and pay cuts before, and we have seen the impact on our students and on our teachers. After studying government cuts to education during the last recession and their impact on schools, University of South Carolina law professor Derek Black stated in the Washington Post, "Last time legislators convinced themselves that schools could absorb these losses without harming kids. Studies later confirmed their naivete. Recession-era cuts depress student achievement. The American Educational Research Association found the Great Recession and subsequent shock to school spending was associated with significant declines in student academic achievement, with school districts serving high concentrations of low-income and minority students experienced greater declines in achievement from school-age exposure to the recession. Thus, district achievement gaps may have widened as a result of the Great Recession. The Great Recession also deeply impacted our teachers and led to the teacher shortage crisis. Where we've discussed many times before, Hawaii has nearly 1,000 qualified teachers every year that we fall short of. This year, for the first time, we were able to make a dent into that number by passing the differentials. Now it looks like we're facing these problems all over again. And our veteran teachers are still facing the impacts of the previous recession, where our mid-level public school teachers in Hawaii earn $18,000 to $30,000 less than their mainland counterparts. Furthermore, every single time we cut teachers' pay and cut education, it further discourages more people from going into the education profession. We have seen in the last 10 years, the amount of Hawaii college graduates with education degrees has dropped by 37%. And we've seen that same trend on the mainland. Governor Ige claims he has no choice but to implement these furloughs. This is not true. He has many other options. Congress right now is close to passing a stimulus bill. There are reserve funds of $614 million. The governor can borrow $1.3 billion, and legislators have said it's too early. To the Board of Education, I know many of you care about public education, and a joint statement saying about not cutting funding is something that HSTA would appreciate. Thank you.
Sierra Mahin, followed by Ty Baird. Nico Friedman. Sierra, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, this is Sierra Mahan.
Aloha, Sierra. Your time begins now.
Aloha, my name is Sierra Mahan. I'm testifying on discussion item 5B on furloughs. I was born and raised on Maui. I have been a teacher in the state of Hawaii for over 20 years. I taught middle school math on Maui, and I'm currently a kindergarten teacher at Waikalua School on the Big Island. First of all, I'm concerned about the education of my students. They finally came back to school in person last week. The rest of the time, they are participating in distance learning through technology. And we're talking about 5-year-olds on technology. Furloughs would further decrease the hours of valuable face-to-face learning time. It's already not enough, and it would be very unfortunate for the children of Hawaii if we decrease their educational hours even more. On a personal note, I have struggled financially on a teacher's salary. I had to have 2 part-time jobs in order to get by and raise my 2 children. In 2013, I finally decided to quit teaching and pursue a career in real estate, which I did for 3 years. And I made more money, way more money than I did in teaching, but my heart was not into it. After 3 years, I realized that I truly missed my calling of being a teacher, and I returned to the classroom. I have been back teaching for 3 years now. Before the pandemic, I was tutoring English language learners after school to boost my pay. I have already lost out on that pay this year. If we are furloughed and our pay is decreased, I'm definitely considering quitting and pursuing my real estate career again. This has been the most stressful year of teaching in my 20 years, and the fact that we could get a pay decrease now is a slap in the face. You are going to lose great teachers over this. There is already a teacher shortage in Hawaii, and we are already some of the lowest paid teachers in the country. Take the money away from somewhere else, but not from the children of Hawaii, and not from teachers who deserve more pay than what we are already getting paid. Thank you very much.
Ty Baird. Nicole Friedman. Ty, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Aloha, my name is Ty Baird. I am a special education teacher at Kahului Elementary School on the island of Maui. I am a proud member of the Hawaii State Teachers Association. I am testifying today on discussion item 5B regarding Department of Education furloughs. I believe that we as teachers are the eighth wonder of our world. We know that the single most important factor in a child's educational journey is the person that stands at the front of that classroom. We also know that research shows that this impacts our students, specifically our low-income families. I must share with you that it also discourages people from going into education, and does so every single time we do this and we impart these on our community and our society. I'm lucky enough and fortunate enough to say that I pay a mortgage, I can pay my bills, I can pay for my electricity, my utilities, and the necessary things to function as a teacher, but I'm surrounded by young men and women who are in a serious predicament. My principal did inform our school of positions being eliminated and how it will affect our school. There are currently 11 affected teachers at this school in particular. That's a lot. There's 4 on leave who are owed a position, and 7 who are either being told that they are out of a position completely or that they will have to reapply elsewhere. Teaching and growing into an island community that you love and that you feel extremely connected to is so special, and yet so hard to be told that there is no hope for you. It is the bad, the worse, and the ugly. It is going to shortchange our school and shortchange our students. They will be the ones at an extreme disadvantage. This is not right. It's illegal. It is against our contract. Sylvia Luke, our finance chair, shared that there are other ways, multiple ways to balance the budget, and they do not include pay cut days. I need you and I implore you, Governor Ige. I campaigned for you. I backed you. I walked in a parade for you. I think that the issue of furloughs and the impact that it will have on our keiki as well as our teachers is something you need to seriously contemplate and fix. Thank you very much, board. I appreciate your time.
Nico Friedman, followed by Lisa Morrison, then Sherry Nakamura. Nico, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Nico. Please proceed.
Thank you. Aloha, Board Chair and members of the Board of Education, as well as fellow educators. I'm testifying today on, pardon me. I'm testifying today on the discussion item 5B, the teacher furloughs. I'm also testifying as an individual. My full testimony is available. I have submitted that. But I wanted to highlight today to the board the importance of considering these furloughs and the impact that it'll have, not just on our teachers, but also on our keiki. When I first came to Hawaii, I came as an emergency hire, and I came as an educator taking a SATEP program with no background in education. But my father was a teacher, is a teacher, has been for many, many years, and inspired me to continue pursuing education, not just for myself, but to share with others, to learn, to grow, and to continue contribute to our communities. When I first came here, I heard about the furloughs, I heard about the actions that had happened, and I saw the impacts in my school and the surrounding schools. I had heard from other teachers and colleagues about the woes that they faced, about the cuts, about the sacrifices that they had to make. But no matter what I heard, all I ever hear these teachers say is that how much they support our keiki, how much they support their education, and how much they sacrifice to make sure that they do everything they can to ensure that the kids in this state, in this country, are getting an education that will further them, not just as members of our community, but members of our growing world and nation. It saddens me to hear about all of these issues, and I have to highlight some of the things that I've come across myself. My wife and I are both educators. We both dedicate our time to our schools as much as we can. We take on leadership roles in as much capacity as we can, and we're both up for tenure in this coming year. But lately, we've had to consider what our future here in the state will be like. Will we be able to maintain our life as well as caring for our keiki, who we dedicate so much of our lives to? Will we be able to give back to our community truly and be able to care for ourselves and our family, our daughter who has special needs, and myself? I was diagnosed with Crohn's this last year. I have a debilitating life condition that will continue for the rest of my life. I'm 28 years old. I'm going to be, like I said, tenured next year. And I can't fathom just the impact that this will have, not just on me, but all of these teachers who dedicate so much of their time working so hard to commit to the students, to commit to education, and to commit to the DOE. It's a slap in the face to see that we're not being supported today. And I urge the board to consider the deep impact this will have on not just myself, but everyone involved. Thank you for your time.
Lisa Morrison, Sherry Nakamura, Susan Pecola Davis. Lisa, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. Before I begin my prepared remarks, I would just like to correct something that was said by someone who gave testimony before me. And that person said that the federal government has denied waivers from standardized testing for the school year. But in actuality, it is the current Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, who said that states shouldn't count on getting waivers. But fortunately, she's not going to be employed that much longer. And so I would implore you to continue to pursue a waiver from standardized testing. In a normal year, they indicate only that students have a certain socioeconomic status. And in this year, all they will do is confirm what we already know, and that is that every student has been disadvantaged by the global pandemic that we've suffered. And now I'd like to continue with my prepared remarks. I'm the parent of a child at Paia Elementary, as well as a teacher at Maui Waina Intermediate School. And you've heard from me before, so many of you know that I'm a student activities coordinator. In the past 5 years, I've handled spelling bees and picture days, taken students to Oahu for leadership conferences and the Capitol to visit their legislators. I've watched students tie-dye hundreds of shirts and witnessed many a TikTok dance-off. I've convinced my colleagues to dress like absolute fools, and I've done so myself just to bring a smile to kids' faces. Sometimes I'm the reason students want to come to school. And as a result of the budget cuts you adopted at the December 3rd meeting, my position will be cut for the foreseeable future. I don't say this to earn sympathy, even though I've loved being a SAC. But I'm that unicorn teacher who's licensed in English and math. So I'm employable even in the deepest of recessions. I feel sorry for the smart, young, capable teacher I will bump and who will have to leave Hawaii because we can't afford her. It might be someone like the other Lisa at my school who submitted written testimony to you. And as it turns out, that might not matter because her testimony indicates that the illegally imposed furloughs will force her to leave teaching in Hawaii simply because she can't afford to continue doing what she loves. Hawaii has hired thousands and thousands of teachers like that. You don't have a recruitment problem, you have a retention pandemic. I've watched many leave, not because they want to, but because you leave them no choice. And that is spirit breaking. These are people who may never come back to teaching. And as a student activities coordinator, I know a little bit about spirit. Once you break a teacher's spirit, you lose her forever. Please reconsider what you may think is inevitable. Please use the power you possess to change course and save public education for my children and many others. Mahalo.
Sherry Nakamura, Susan Piccola Davis, Amanda Lacar. Sherry, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Sherry. Please proceed.
Aloha Chair Payne and members of the board. My name is Sherry Nakamura, Director of He'e Coalition. I'm commenting today on discussion item 5B and action items 6A and B. Regarding discussion item 5B, we were surprised to see that the superintendent issued her furlough plan without consultation or approval from the board. We are against furloughs for classroom teachers, and we are extremely concerned about the impact on the statutory requirement of school days and hours. On action item 6A, we respectfully ask the board to consider adding to its legislative priorities the underscored language in our written testimony, which asks the board to support legislation preserving resources for our high-needs students. Regarding action item 6B, we have 3 points to make. Number 1, He'e has been asking for Q4 device and connectivity data since April, but there has been no substantiated information from the department, even on its data dashboard website. Therefore, we suggest that Q4 numbers not be used, but rather a quarter where data is available, with an explanation of how the gaps were determined. Number 2, similarly for literacy targets, we suggest using Q2 data instead of Q1's, since many students were not assigned Q1 grades. Number 3, for the strategic plan indicators, we are strongly opposed to the superintendent's proposal of using average daily attendance instead of chronic absenteeism. Average daily attendance masks which students are at risk of academic failure due to chronic absenteeism. Thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Susan Piccola Davis, Amanda Lacar, Jody Kunimitsu. Susan, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Proceed.
Thank you. I am testifying in opposition to item 5B. As if the situation wasn't bad enough, let's cut salaries. Let's furlough teachers. Can't fix the unemployment system to improve the economy. That's a lost cause. So yes, locals have to spend wisely. This is the domino effect of relying on tourism, and education is always at the bottom. Hawaii is notorious for making hasty decisions with Band-Aid solutions. The Department of Education budget cuts and furlough days are just two examples of how the state puts education first. It is imperative that the board understand that delaying these decisions made in haste, the effects of Ebenezer Scrooge economics, and the board's obligation to our state's education system is negatively affecting students, teachers, and families. The teachers should not have to testify to draw you the dismal picture. You are intelligent, you already know. Don't plead with the teachers to testify to the effects of these actions because you need to hear them. They have been pleading with you for over 6 months. The department still does it her way, regardless of what is heard at this meeting. A red flag should have gone up when the board did not have a chance to provide input or comment on the submitted budget because it was already on the governor's desk. The board must take a stance alongside of HSTA, regardless of your appointment to the board by the governor. If not, the board is part of the problem, another brick in the wall. It is a disgrace to the teaching profession that our governor takes this position that education gets lumped in with other government entities to salvage our economy. Yet he designates teachers as essential employees, forcing them to work and then asking to lower their pay and furlough. Other essential employees are protected, but not our teachers. From the last meeting, the board must, required by law, approve an education budget with zero input. The reluctant voting of aye from board members is unacceptable. If the board is required to approve the budget, then those members that did not want to should have been able to vote their conscience. The Board of Education has become a platform for discussions and testimonies that lead down the rabbit hole. No amount of testimonies, written or oral, will have the action taken that is necessary to stand our ground in the face of this travesty. Nothing should be stopping the board for requesting a formal meeting with the governor and at least plead your case. If you truly support the department, then show it. The community is losing faith in the Board of Education. Please step up to the plate. Thank you.
Amanda Lakar, Jody Kunimitsu, Claire Baroga. Amanda, can you hear me?
Aloha, can you hear me?
Yes, Amanda, please proceed.
Aloha, my name is Amanda Lakar, and I am a special education teacher from Mokulele Elementary. I am speaking on agenda item 5B. Hawaii already has a shortage of teachers, certified teachers, in the classroom. I am extremely concerned with the furlough action, as I feel this will have an impact on all schools, as many of our teachers will begin the retirement process, especially with their high 3 already plateaued. Another concern I have is the immediate impact is the financial strain the furloughs will have across the state employees, not only teachers, but our EAs and our custodians, the ones that are also there working with the teachers and working for the students. Our contracts were agreed by the Department of Education, and that contract should be upheld. If an immediate action is needed for financial, then may I suggest no effect should occur to the classroom and school employees. We are the ones that are supporting the whole child. We are the ones now will have to decide between working to the contract or supporting the after-school needs of our students. Thank you for listening to my testimony.
Jody Kunimitsu, Claire Baroga, Logan Okita. Jody, can you hear me? Jody Kunimitsu.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
Please
okay.
proceed.
Thank you. Aloha board members, my name is Jody Kunimitsu. I am a math teacher at Maui High School and a proud member of the Hawaii State Teachers Association. I am speaking on discussion item 5B, and I strongly oppose the furlough plan by Governor David Ige and the Department of Education. My husband and I are both DOE teachers. This is the second time in a little over a decade that we are both being furloughed by the state. For me, this is not only about money, though our household income would suffer twofold. This is about respect for our profession and for the people you always expect to save the children. Hawaii's public education system is dying a slow and painful death. It's basically surviving off of teachers' goodwill and big hearts. But I'm warning you, that supply is draining. We've always put in way more time than our contracted hours and used our own money to supply our classrooms. But during this unprecedented school year, we gave more than ever before. We struggled to make distance and hybrid learning work for our students despite confusing and unsafe working conditions. We were just hit with massive budget cuts that'll force us to do much more with much less. Now here we are once again facing lower pay and no time to prepare a decent education for our students, all in the name of sacrifice. You see, the problem is that you think every teacher will just suck it up and stay in the DOE for the kids. And the ones that choose to go, well, we'll survive without them, right? Wrong. Many highly qualified teachers are already leaving because they're either tired of being treated like this or they just can't afford to stay in Hawaii. Do you see a long line of applicants waiting to take their place? I don't. The public education system is on a ventilator, and we are the exhausted, overworked staff trying desperately to keep it alive. Stop killing it and stop making excuses. It's time to take a stand by saying no to budget cuts and furloughs. We've suffered enough. Our students have suffered enough. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify.
Claire Baroga, Logan Okita, Osa Tui. Claire, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Good afternoon, Board of Education. My name is Claire Baroga. I am a kindergarten teacher at Pololo Elementary School. I am speaking on behalf of one of the special education teachers at my school. She writes, in an environment where a long weekend can cause academic skill loss and regression, furloughs are our worst nightmare. Taking instructional time from an already vulnerable population will only widen the gap and slow their academic progress. They have already been deprived of months of professional education and skills training, which has caused regression and skill loss. We cannot take any more from them, and we cannot cut corners when it comes to the future of our children. We must prioritize the education of our children above these budget cuts because they are not just numbers on a paper, they are our future. I would like to also include my own personal testimony where education as a career, we go through all this professional development, we do all the training. In any other occupation, you think about it, they get their pay raises, they stick to their contracts. We are the only occupation I can think of that is allowing these furloughs and these pay cuts. So please also think of the teachers because again, it affects our children so heavily. Thank you so much for the time this afternoon.
Logan Okita, Osa Tui, Kapua Maderos. Logan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, Logan, please proceed.
Thank you. Aloha Board. My name is Logan Okita. I am HSTA's Secretary Treasurer, a member of the negotiations team, and a first grade teacher at Nimitz Elementary. I'm testifying on item 5B. On November 5th, I attended an informational meeting between HSTA and the employer regarding the possibility of furloughs. At this meeting, we were given a potential conceptual plan with dates for the furloughs by the Department of Education representatives. After sharing those initial conceptual plans, the DOE never notified HSTA of the final specific dates before our members found out via email Monday night. Last week, Governor Ige announced that he will implement furloughs on January 1st, and Dr. Kishimoto sent out an email to DOE employees stating that the Governor's Office of Collective Bargaining is the lead on these active negotiations. Therefore, we do not have details of the specific impact to HIDOE employees at this time. If this is the case, then why were we presented a plan by the department at our November 5th meeting? Why did the department wait over a month to release the plan to its employees? Why did they release the plan after 9 p.m. on Monday before the end of the quarter? As a classroom teacher, I'm frustrated that just days before the end of the semester, my important and necessary January 4th workday has been taken away. What am I supposed to do on January 5th? Can I tell my students to read a book and do some iReady lessons while I finish planning the lessons for the week and do their second quarter grades? Oh wait, Those iPads will probably need to be charged for a few hours because they'll die over the 2-week break. Teaching 2 different in-person groups and a distance learning group will have with a daily synchronous session and small group intervention for the students who are staying at home online requires a lot of planning. That planning time is now gone. The student population at Nimitz is very transient. What happens if someone enrolls over the break? I won't have a desk or materials prepared for them. I have had to pivot, adjust, and walk blindfolded for most of the school year. But now that I have finally found a sense of normalcy again, you're pulling the rug out from under me. Please consider how furloughs impact your educators who are burning the candle from both ends and the students who are relying on us for a sense of stability. Thank you.
Osa Tui, Kapua Medeiros, Sarah Tochiki. Osa Tui, Vice President, Hawaii State Teachers Association. Osa, can you hear me?
Mahalo, Gina, and happy holidays to you.
Mahalo, please proceed.
Aloha Board, Osatui, McKinley High, and HSTA Vice President. Thank you for your questions, but so many more remain to be answered. The Superintendent intends to violate contracts on January 4 and February 12, with further dates projected. What authority does the Superintendent have, and does the BOE have a say? Skeptical lawmakers believe this contract violation won't hold up in court. This will become a problem when it gets struck down. Are there contingencies being developed? On November 5th, the department shared a concept, but not a proposal, of their furlough plan with HSTA. Was it shared with you before being emailed to all DOE employees on Monday night? Is it okay that the superintendent has circumvented HSTA, HGEA, and UPW and engaged in direct dealing with employees? What pay cut should employees expect? The only number out there is 9.2%. 12-month teachers work 2 months or 20% more than 10-month employees. Why are they expected to take 67% more furlough days? If different amounts of furlough are okay, shouldn't the leadership team take 12 days through June, like other departments, instead of 10? In June, 12-month teachers have 3 days out of 11 in a single pay period as furlough. Are pay cuts being spread out, or are they being deducted only when furloughs happen? If pay cuts don't come out to 9.2% by June, should employees expect to see larger pay cuts next school year? Has the superintendent informed the board that 2 weeks ago, HSTA was given a proposal expecting teachers to provide instruction without additional pay for 5 of the following 6 days? 1 day during this winter break, the January 4 teacher workday, Teacher Institute Day, 1 day during spring break, the Good Friday holiday, and the June 1st teacher workday. How does the department expect teachers to return on the days just mentioned without consulting other bargaining units? The board is authorized to exercise control over the public school system. How are those powers going to be exercised when it comes to our public charter school teachers who are in limbo right now? Essential state workers will contribute nothing in terms of reduction in work or pay. Is education not one of the most fundamental and essential operations of a society? Don't hurt our keiki. Mahalo.
Kapua Medeiros, Sarah Tochiki, Vinny Ryu. Kapua Medeiros is not present. Sarah Tochiki. Sarah, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Sarah Tochiki, and I'm the band director at Chiefs Kamakahele Middle School in Kauai. I'm the vice president of the Kauai chapter of HSTA, and this is my testimony for item 5B regarding furloughs. I'm not here to talk about how furloughs will hurt financially. Many are hurting due to the pandemic, and I understand that the state has a large decline in revenue. What I want to make clear to everyone on this board is the ruse of furloughs. Furloughs are really the exploitation of the goodwill of educators to do best for their students. The state is promising that students will not lose out due to these furloughs, but furloughs mean a reduction in pay with a proportional reduction in work. It is impossible to expect educators to provide the same experience in fewer days. We already put in many hours outside of the workday to provide quality education for our students. These furloughs are an insult because it is a further lack of acknowledgement by the state of the time that we truly devote to our craft. We are highly educated and skilled professionals. Even if furlough days for educators are on non-instructional days, students will still lose out. That time is to make sure that students have the best experience when they are on campus. Lawyers bill for all the hours they spend working on a client's case. We do not expect them to just charge for the time they meet with the client. Educators have unjustly been expected to do this since the beginning of the profession, and it is wrong. By calling it a furlough day, the state is creating smoke and mirrors of a reduction of work, therefore a reduction in pay. The underlying message, however, is we want you to do more work for free from home, which is ironic since we have some educators who were denied the request to work from home due to underlying health conditions. These furloughs are unethical because they exploit our passion for helping the next generation. For you as an adult, a few days here and there might not be a huge sacrifice, but we are talking about young people and their entire futures ahead of them. The state of Hawaii has a duty to provide our students with the best education, and that starts with treating its educators well. So let us be the state that values its educators for their contributions. Thank you very much for your time.
Vinny BU. Ikalama if I mispronounced your name. Vinny, can you hear me? Vinny? Vinny, can you hear me? Is your microphone unmuted? Final call for Vinny BU.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Hello?
Yes, Vinny, please proceed.
Thank you. I'd like to begin by thanking the board and HSTA for giving me this opportunity to speak. My name is Vinny Baiju, and I'm a social studies teacher at Aiea High School and a proud member of the Hawaii State Teachers Association. I'm testifying on discussion item 5B regarding the Department of Education furloughs. I am gravely concerned about the input of furloughs into our current system. I can share a little bit about my background. I'm an out-of-state teacher, and this is my first year speaking and teaching in the Hawaii Department of Education. While we've had many fantastic teachers with many years under their belt testifying, I think it's important that we hear from first-year teachers like myself, because I know many of my colleagues are terrified to testify in front of a board and speak out because of fear of losing their job. I think we have a unique perspective to offer because we are outside of the system and we are aware of what could be and not just what is. I think we are all clear on the state of teacher pay in Hawaii. According to many preeminent studies like that done by Education Surge or the Kalia Financial Group, Hawaii is ranked dead last in teacher pay when adjusted for living situations. But I want to raise the point that that does not begin to tell the least bit of the story. Those studies use the average teacher salary, not the minimum amount for emergency hires or first-year teachers. I have trouble making rent. It is only for so many days in a row that you can eat ramen over and over again before you begin to question your life decisions. But beyond the financial aspect of the issue, I feel a deep disrespect and hypocrisy to the situation that is confronting me. It is clear to me that Hawaii cares about their keiki and educators, but they don't put their money where their mouth is. So many times have I been told, thank you for doing what you do, and thank you for working so hard. But after a point, this not only just becomes empty rhetoric, but also becomes deeply insulting when the actual pay or decisions of our government does not match this. That is the position I am in now. I moved to Hawaii to help. I moved to Hawaii because of my deep interest in the culture here. I teach AP Psychology, Participation in Democracy, and Modern Hawaiian History, all topics near and dear to my heart, and topics that I believe are important for our education. But it's not easy for me to continue to do so, and I deeply ask the board to reconsider what they are doing to those who move to Hawaii and who want to stay here. Thank you for your time, and I hope you reconsider.
Chair Payne, this concludes oral testimony.
Thank you. We have also received quite a bit of written testimony that is posted on our website. And I encourage you to read it. It's well thought out and heartfelt, and I sincerely appreciate all of the comments and remarks that were made. Before we move on to our agenda item number 4, I have a few personal remarks to make concerning the topic that most of the testimony was centered on. I've been around a very long time in the department, and I've been through the furloughs as a principal during the last time that they were imposed. This new round of furloughs and cuts to the budget are the latest blow to our system of public education. We are in terrible financial circumstances, and I understand that we have to work with the resources that are given to us from the budgets of the governor and the legislature and the federal government. This board does not have the power to collect and allocate resources as do boards in other states. I do want to acknowledge the superintendent and her leadership team because they really have been working hard behind the scenes to protect the schools and the services to students. But they also don't have control over how much money is given to them. And we didn't start from a position of overflowing coffers before the cuts were made, but we really were moving in a position where improving teacher salaries became a real possibility. And I know that support for the professionals who are working directly with the students has a direct impact on student achievement. We have not done enough of this, but we were working towards that. The despair that is evident in the testimony of teachers comes through, and my heart breaks at the personal stories they shared. And as this plays out, the losses from our workforce will impact our students, especially our most vulnerable students whose parents do not have the resources to supplement the losses of services that have been provided by schools. The poorest children will not have music lessons and other experiences in the arts or in athletics that parents pay for if they have the resources to do it. The schools have provided these things, and they are being cut now. The poorest children will suffer the most, and that is how it has always been. While I know that the state budget has emptied its funds and the future looks bleak, I believe that an excellent public education system is the foundation for a thriving Hawaii. This will require that we look at adequately funding our schools with a stable and long-term commitment to an excellent educational system. We can't keep moving the resources so that we never get a stable footing. But this is a much bigger conversation than educators talking to each other. This is a conversation that the community needs to have, because the larger community really needs to say whether they want to have an excellent public school system. And if they want to have it, are they willing to help pay for it? We've been through lots of visioning and input gathering, and I have a feeling that nobody's going to come the next time they're invited, because so much of what we vision comes with a cost, and we're not able to provide it. Individually, we can all help on a small scale to support schools and teachers, which places where we have connections, where we know people. But this is very much like the little boy throwing the starfish back into the ocean. He's saving a few starfish, and we can make a small difference for some individuals who are suffering. And I know that some parent groups at schools and some alumni associations are increasing their support and stepping forward to help. But all of these well-intentioned supports will not do anything for our state system. In fact, the increases in community supports for the more affluent communities and schools will also increase the equity gap. It is important for the community beyond the public education system to understand that the short and long-term impacts of the cuts to public education, the future costs for healthcare, social services, criminal justice, and many other things will rise when a community has a large percentage of its population in poverty. And that is also increasing in Hawaii and is more than half of our students in our public schools. A high quality education system can mitigate the impacts of poverty and will have long-term benefits to the community. We will be dealing with the consequences of our decisions for many years to come. It'll take probably a generation to recover if things go well. But it's a fact in our world that we pay for what we value as individuals and as a community. It is time for those outside of our public education bubble to talk about whether they are willing to pay for our public schools and whether they believe our public schools are worthy of the support needed to assure that they are excellent. So I've had my say. It's been on my mind for a long time, and I would like to offer some hope that things will get better, but I'm not quite prepared to do that yet. But moving on, we do have some business to accomplish, and item 4 is where we are, and it is the Human Resources Committee report. We had a meeting earlier today, and I would like to call on Committee Chairperson Dwight Takeno to provide his report on the meeting that was held earlier. Board Member Takeno.
Thank you, Chair Payne. Good afternoon, members of the board, Superintendent Kishimoto, and members of the public. On behalf of Vice Chair Kaimana Barkasi and myself, the following is the Human Resources Committee report. The HR committee met this morning with one discussion item and no action items on the agenda. The discussion was over DOE's presentation on the Department of Education's reorganization plan to preserve classroom instruction, temporary or permanent closure, consolidations, reorganization, restructuring, or merger of offices, programs, services, and positions for state office. The DOE, through its Assistant Superintendent, Cindy Covell, provided a short presentation over the written materials that were submitted to the board. The department provided a more detailed information and response on the state office functions, program services, and positions that was presented to the FIT committee earlier in the month, which was helpful and appreciated. It provided the board with a good baseline and current picture of the state office and a template that the board can expect to see next month when the complex and schools share their academic and financial plans. There are no reorganization plans shared by the DOE today for the state office, but the committee expects that the DOE will continue to review its operations and structure at all levels due to the continued evolution of challenges it faces in a forward and progressive manner. And with that, Chair, that concludes our Human Resources Committee report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Takeno. We are now in item 5, which are our discussion items. And the first one is the state librarian's mid-year review of her priorities for the 2020-2021 school year, which is part of the evaluation process for the state librarian. I would like to call on State Librarian Stacy Aldrich to present on this agenda item.
Aloha Board Chair and members of the board. It is nice to spend time with you today. Before I begin, I just want to thank everybody who is going through all these horrible times right now. I'm very grateful to all the teachers for all the work that you're doing, and I'm very grateful to all our library staff who are working really hard too. And I know it's difficult, but I think we will get through it together. I'd just like to go over briefly what we've been doing in the past couple of months regarding the various priorities that we have. And there are 3 priorities that we've been focusing on as we've also been continuing to find flexible ways to continue to serve our communities. The first priority has been to continue to work on implementing a statewide service philosophy for consistent library service across the state. And at this juncture, we are in the process of taking the training that was designed to be presented last April before the right when the pandemic, right close to the beginning of the pandemic came about. And we are realigning it into virtual training. And so we are breaking it into units that will be delivering over several weeks with opportunities for practice in between. And again, these will help us to help standardize across the system the ways that we serve. We did do a survey last year and found that many people love their libraries and the staff, and we want to keep on pursuing our philosophy, which is to always provide service with aloha and show that we value everybody who welcomes and welcome everybody who comes into our spaces, and that we're courteous, helpful, knowledgeable, and dedicated to serving our communities. Our target month to begin the actual training will be February of 2021. For priority 2, developing cohesive strategies for our virtual collections, we have continued to do a lot of work around ebooks and looking at all of the usage statistics that we have regarding ebooks. We recently did have a report put together for us by Overdrive, and we've learned some really interesting things about our usage and also about how we're purchasing things and how the materials are used by genre. So for instance, we have way more people checking out thrillers than we're actually purchasing, and the same with romance. Those are the 2 that are most popular. Romance is always popular in electronic versions. So we're using that data to be more effective in the way that we're selecting materials to support people who are using the resources that we have. We also saw an incredible jump from March to May in the number of ebooks that are being checked out. In March, we had 86,000 checkouts. By May, we had 108,000 checkouts of ebooks. So we know that the materials that we've been purchasing and we put extra effort into are being checked out, but we want to use this data to continue to provide effective and efficient collections to serve the public. So we're continuing to use all that data, and we've also started to look at the various data that's provided by all of our vendors around the virtual resources that we have, or digital resources, the databases that we have. And one of our challenges is that each of the vendors provides data in very different ways, and so we're not always comparing the same thing. So looking at how many times a database was accessed can sometimes be looking at different data. So it's like comparing apples and little baby, I used to say baby monkeys, because they're very different. So we're trying to get clear on the data so that, again, we can look at the budget and we can make sure that we are creating access to those resources that are most important to the community, for students, for education, and for the public. So again, we are using all of that data, and we have begun to really begin to look at our processes and create more effective process. For priority 3, we around innovating our services and management of our resources around the new normal. We've been doing a lot of different things. We have settled on a platform for delivering training to our staff, so we can make sure that they always have access to resources and to new things that we want to make sure that they have skill sets for. So we've been using Niche Academy. There have been so many virtual conferences, we've been able to have more staff attend them. And the way that we share back all those innovations and the things that staff are learning is that anybody who attends those webinars does an additional webinar for everybody on our staff to share what they have learned. We've also been experimenting with platforms for delivering virtual programming, specifically making sure that we have story times available, and also that we can do live virtual programs. So we've been using a mix of YouTube and Zoom, and we've had several successful programs with authors and live programs with authors, and also we had Nancy Pearl, who's a famous librarian, come and join us and open to speak to people, and we got a pretty good turnout for that as well. And we're continuing to look for ways to bridge virtual and eventually physical, but looking at what are the other kinds of things we could do in terms of virtual programming. And so we have been, we've just purchased equipment for all of our branches so that they'll have virtual programming kits, so they can put together tours of the libraries, they can do live programming, they can do story times, children's librarians can do story times or crafts that we can make available on our website. And so we just received the equipment, and we're putting the kits together, and we hope to do get the kits out by January and more training for staff in February on the use of those kits. For priority 3, innovate our services and management of our resources around the new normal. We're still looking to develop a good feedback loop for our virtual programs that are available on demand. For live programs, we do have a follow-up email that goes out to folks and asks them if they have any comments, but we're still looking for an overall structure for getting feedback from the community on those programs. For the other indicators, we are working on our Aloha sensor project, which is designed to use artificial intelligence to help count people coming into our spaces, so we can better manage the number of people in our spaces, and people will know how many people are in the building as we transition through COVID. And so these, and it also long-term will allow us to have really good counts of data on how many people are coming into our spaces and what times of the day are our spaces most used. And so we're very excited. We've already piloted the sensors at the Kaimuki Library. We've just installed sensors at the Kaneohe Library, and we're learning how to position them correctly and to make sure that they're functioning properly within each of the spaces, because each of our libraries are so very different. The one thing I want to say about the Aloha AI is it is not recording. We don't have any photographs of people. It literally, the AI knows what a person walking looks like and texture, but we have no other information. So we're very conscientious about the privacy of the people who are coming into the library. So this is just literally, it's just a counter at this point. We hope to have all the installations done by the end of January. It might take a little bit more time. And part of that was time getting the equipment in, and also we have to still train our AFITs on making sure we put all of the new sensors into the libraries. And then moving forward, we really do look forward to not only having the sensors available to help us count data, but to create cohorts for students to come in and learn how to use AI and also think about data. So informal opportunities for our communities and for students. So those are the, that's where we are with the main priorities. And during the session where I presented which priorities we'd had, I had removed one of the priorities, and Board Vice Chairperson Member Uemura asked if I would continue to follow that priority and make sure that we kept it in. And that one was related to the robust strategy for patron input and feedback. And so we did completely restructure our online feedback form last year. Well, within the past couple of months, and being able to actually streamline some of the questions that we're getting because we've made it easier. People can go into one form and figure out what to form. So we're getting really good feedback from people. Good feedback meaning that they're participating in the online feedback. So people are using it, and it's very helpful. It helps us understand how people are, what concerns they have, what's working, what's not working. So we take that feedback very seriously. We're still trying to figure out how to do a more in-depth evaluation or focus groups with people, and looking at, now that we've become very comfortable with Zoom, and we have Zoom webinar as well, how we might be able to potentially do some future virtual groups to get feedback from across the state. It doesn't get at the people necessarily who don't have access to digital unless they're in the library. So there's a lot that we still need to work out to figure out how to do that. And lastly, there's a component to this where I would provide a comprehensive report, but that's based on us getting the feedback from the public. So that's where we are right now, and I am happy to answer any questions that you all may have. Mahalo.
Thank you, Stacy. And before I open it up to the board, I just want to say how much your work and your staff's work is appreciated. The libraries have been a haven for a lot of folks, and I know you've worked really hard to get services back and to keep people safe through that process. So thank you for that. And now, are there any board members that would like to speak to this item on our agenda? Board Member Fallon.
Thank you, Chair Payne. Board Member Lynn Fallon. First, thank you for your report and your update, and also for reaching out to me over the last month to familiarize me with your library system and your goals. It's very helpful. I have one question regarding the evaluation and your mid-year progress and leading to the end of the year progress. How will the furloughs will the furloughs affect your achieving the goals you set and the objectives?
I definitely thank you for your question. I think they definitely will affect in terms of time. The furloughs would remove, at least for now, at least 2 days a month. So that probably will impact the amount of time that we have to train staff. And we're also trying to balance our energy too. We normally have we have probably about 170 students who are helping our staff. And I'm not sure that everybody's aware, but the libraries have become like warehouses because we have library pickup. Even though we have wiki visits now where you can come in for about 45 minutes and browse and grab a book and go, most people are still placing orders, and the staff are having to put the orders of books together and then check them out and then take them back in, and then also deal with them with a quarantine process. So when people check out books, they take them home. When they come back, we are quarantining them currently for 5 days, but we think some of the new guidance, we can shorten that amount of time. But there's a lot of material that is flowing right now in our library. So we have to balance the work that they're trying to do in order to support the communities, but also we want to continue to do our training and to also implement these important priorities. So I think in terms of our timing might be pushed out further into the future, and that would be the largest impact for us. It's just we start to run out of time.
Thank you. I yield. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Board Member Cox?
Thank you, Maggie Cox here. I really don't have a question. I just want to say to you that I'm always impressed with your reports. They're so easy to follow. I know exactly what it is you're trying to get accomplished. And so I'm just really proud of how the library system is working under you. Thank you very much for all your hard work. I yield.
Mahalo.
Thank you. Are there others who would like to speak to this agenda item? Board Member Uemura, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair Payne. I just wanted to echo Board Member Cox and Board Member Fallon's comments, and just piggyback on Board Member Fallon's comments on the furlough, because one of my questions was going to be on your targets. I was going to use SMART goals, so the timing, and it appears, my first assumption was basically, it seems like you're on target to complete it by the target dates, but I guess your recent comment on the furloughs might push some of that back. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes.
Okay, and that's understandable. But again, I'd like to echo the board members' comments. You're doing a terrific job. Your reports are easy to follow. And I appreciate you bringing forth your last priority that it was not completed the last cycle and updating the board on that. So again, keep up the good work. Appreciate what you do. Thank you.
Mahalo.
Are there other board members who would like to make a comment or ask a question? Give you a second. Okay, if not, we will move on to our next agenda item, and thank you very much, Stacy, for your service, and please thank your staff also for the work that they are doing.
Mahalo, I will do it. And thank you very much for all of your support.
Okay, we are moving now to B, which is presentation on questions regarding the Department of Education furloughs, including the furlough schedule, the impact on school planning and services, and communications with family and employees. Now, our agenda item went up and my memo went up prior to the department's release of the furlough plan and prior to the letter that the governor sent to the superintendent that we received copies of this morning. So some of the questions have been addressed in the furlough plan that has been put forth, but this has clearly raised a lot of concern throughout our department. So if board members would like to weigh in on this discussion, I will again remind you to raise your hands when you would like to speak and lower it after you have finished speaking. So, board members, are there any comments in response to the memo? Oh, excuse me. Okay, board member Voss, followed by board member Vice Chair Uemura.
Thank you, Chair. As the chair said in her opening remarks, the board and the superintendent do not have any authority or control over furloughs. The governor has that awful responsibility in this budget shortfall. The governor deliberately structured his furlough proposal with only one day for the Department of Education in January to provide flexibility to see what would happen with the federal money. And in fairness to the governor, nobody knew what Congress was going to do. But circumstances have now changed. By all accounts, it appears very, very likely that Congress will include a large amount of money for education spending in the upcoming stimulus bill that's going to be passed this weekend. And given that, we need to diffuse this situation and reduce this anxiety among our teachers, staff, and families. I respectfully but strongly urge the governor to immediately rescind his furlough directive to the Department of Education, so the department and a board rep can resume midterm bargaining with the unions to see how this additional federal money could potentially minimize or eliminate furloughs or layoffs and preserve instructional days for our students. At this point, this need not and should not go to court.
Thank you, Mr. Voss. Board Member Uemura, followed by Board Member Fallon.
Thank you, Chair Payne. I guess I might have missed the importance of your comments, but I thought that the questions that you included in your memo was excellent, and I thought that the board should at least kind of have these questions answered. And I guess the reason why I'm doing this is really out of frustration, because you know, again, the board has been left out of the discussion. The governor has worked directly with the superintendent coming out with the furlough plan. And now we have no input into that. And the board should have. And so I guess I don't like the way, the process in which this was done. The board that has oversight over the Department of Education should have input into how this plan comes about. So, I want to get up to the bottom of this, but Chair, I'll leave it up to you. I mean, you have a better sense of what's going on, but and it's because I'm speaking out of frustration. I just want to make sure that we all know what's happening, that the public knows what's happening, and I do agree with Bruce that the governor, the board should send a letter. She sent a letter from the board to the governor expressing our disappointment in how this thing was done, and he should definitely rescind the furlough directive. I am in total support of that, because the public needs to know that the board is not in support of the furloughs. The board has had no input into this. So with that, Chair, I leave it up to you if you want to go through the questions for public sense, for the public purpose. With that, I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Uemura. We did send my memo to the governor's office, and the response went to the superintendent, I think, for clarification. And you did receive a copy of that letter. Some of the things that I asked in the memo were already answered because we were provided this week with that schedule. The governor has indicated that he has the authority to do this. But I think what's really important is for the voices of board members to be shared here, because I know that people are listening, and I agree that we need to follow up directly with the governor, because we are his appointees and we need to have understanding that is clearly not there right now. Board Member Fallon, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Payne. Board Member Lynn Fallon. I would like to request a copy of the memo that was sent out by the governor. I do not believe I received a copy of that. When did it go out?
It went out today, so it may be in your email now, but if not, we can forward you a copy.
I'm not sure. I can't find a copy of it, so I'd like to request that and have it resent. If it was inadvertently lost in the cloud somewhere. You said that many of the questions were answered, so I guess it wouldn't be time-wise efficient to go through each of the questions, because they are excellent questions, and were very helpful to me in thinking about furloughs. I do have a question to the department, and this is related to some details around how much is projected to be saved with the current governor and DOE plan for furloughs.
I think we have AS Brian Hallett and we have the superintendent here, so perhaps they can help us with that.
Aloha, Board Member Fallon. Thank you for the question. The projection for the general projection for the department for the spring semester of 2021 is approximately $43 million. We don't have projections beyond that because the furloughs under the governor's executive order is only specific to the spring. Anything beyond that will be part of negotiations.
And thank you. So in addition to the, so if we don't have furloughs, then there will be a deficit of 43 million projected.
I would just like to make sure that Brian Hallett is on the panel.
He is.
Okay, thank you.
The reason I'm asking is I was trying to get a sense of, the department already went through 100.3 million in cuts. And for next fiscal year, we're being asked, the department is being asked to cut about 100 plus more million. And so this 43 million deficit is on top of everything. Is that correct?
Correct. This is Brian Hallett, CFO for the department. The 43 million is what we believe would be part of the governor's financial plan that has been shared several months ago. We've seen various versions of it. Our expectation is that with furlough implementation, that a restriction or pulling back of appropriated funds would follow. That has not taken place yet, but that's what we expect will happen. Based on the estimated amount of savings that would be realized through the furlough, that Department of Budget and Finance would be pulling back funds in a like amount to help balance the state's budget.
And so when we're looking at the, thank you. So when we're looking at the department's budget for this fiscal year, we're looking at let me withdraw that. So when we look going forward into next fiscal year and the financial plans that the schools and the state level and then the complexes and the schools will be going through going forward for next fiscal year, what we're looking at are really two kinds of budget adjustments. I use that term rather than cuts. The furlough money and also money being cut, the 10% reduction, correct?
That is correct. As we've seen in the governor's financial plan, it wasn't either or. His financial plan was looking at both of those options being necessary.
Okay. And so going forward, as we're thinking about ways to try to prevent or avoid or minimize budget adjustments, we're really looking at furloughs and budget cuts. Is that how to think about it?
Yes, that would be correct.
Thank you. I yield.
Board Member Bakarsi.
Mahalo, Chair Payne, Board Member Kaimana Bakarsi. Mahalo for the excellent questions brought forth in this discussion items. As was stated by some of our other board members and many who have testified, I too, like Board Member Fallon, have not yet received in my inbox the communication from Governor Ige this morning, so I'm a little hesitant to ask follow up on some of these questions. I do know how email sometimes takes a while to get through cyberspace, so perhaps it might be good, since these are the topics, that we could go through these questions, and perhaps you could share some insight on those that were answered, and look to see if any of our other colleagues on this call has some insight to some of the other answers, and then we'll know what we still have to look for. Mahalo, I yield.
Okay, we can do that. I will ask board staff if they can go ahead and send, it may have gone to your board email instead of the other one. So I know that it was sent this morning, so we can check on that to make sure everybody does have a copy. But if we start, some of the questions again have been answered through the department's issuing of the furlough plan. The question about the state public employee sector unions being included in the furlough discussions, that's the first one. What I understand from what was said is that the furloughs beyond June 30th are part of negotiations, but when the governor in his letter, which you should all have very shortly because it was just resent, is that he has the authority to do this based on the emergency powers that he has, and he specifies in his letter what the sections are in the law. So that is the position, and it is something that we know is going to be litigated from the testimony of the HGEA president this morning. So some of those questions are still sort of hanging out there, and people may or may not agree with what the answers are that have been given. The question on the imposing of furloughs unilaterally, again, he does have the authority according to his letter, and he did work with the superintendent and recognizing that the DOE is a little different from the other state offices and has cut the number of furloughs so that it isn't 2 days a month. But feel free, Superintendent, if you would like to make any comments here. I just want to make sure that what I'm saying is correct, because I know that there are sometimes the issues change every day and the responses change a little bit too. So if you would like to join in on your understanding of what is happening, I would appreciate it, because I do know you've been working with the governor to try to minimize the impact on the children and the teachers.
Thank you, Board Chair. I will reiterate, I think, what we're hearing from the public, and this certainly around the ongoing year-over-year concern around targeted revenue generation that comes to the DOE to provide equity and adequacy and predictability in funding year over year. The state does not have that structure in place. It makes for a difficult year-over-year budget process. And now that we're in this very difficult financial situation, it makes it even more difficult to have all of the state agencies kind of treated the same with the issue, I think, that we have around the civil rights of our students to have quality public education in the state, an issue that is at the forefront again. I will say there are a lot of back and forths. The plan that I wrote out is the one that was part of the original discussion with the board when we had the early discussion. This was not negotiated. This is being rolled out through the governor's executive order. the letter I sent out to the public, I purposely sent it out before Friday because Friday, which is just tomorrow, most of our employees will be on vacation, on break. I did not want to wait another week to send out the same information while they were on break. All of the leaders were anxious to be able to plan as effectively as possible as we wait for more and more guidance on this. The governor is imposing the furloughs through his executive order, which covers a 2-month period. And so the letter from me to employees highlights the January and February dates. And there's an asterisk after the March dates, April dates, and June dates, because those will be confirmed in the next executive order. And so this will be done 2 months at a time. I, again, do not want to speak for the governor. I will only reiterate what he said in public, that he is willing to look at changing conditions to see if for each executive order, whether the furloughs need to continue. Again, I think the board has stated today its desire to meet with the governor to have those conversations, again, so that he can speak to the board directly. But I have issued my letter to the employees based on what was known at this time, and because the executive order has already been issued, and based on the letter which I received today. I shared that with board members this morning via the board office at 9:06 a.m. as soon as I received it from the governor that details how the furloughs are to occur. So we'll make sure that in fact has gotten to each of the board members.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent. There's another question that has come up about the school calendar and whether we need to address that. And we have not given a waiver from the law, although we have been told that we could, but we have not. And it's 180 days of instruction that is in the law, but it is a waivable law if we choose to make that change. And we already know that students have lost quite a few days. So that's something that we're going to need to address at some point before the school year ends.
I'm sorry, Board Chair, did you want me to respond to where we are with that?
Yes, any time you want to make a comment, feel free.
So board members and members of the public, again, this is Superintendent Kishimoto. Back in July, the board took action, I believe it was July 30th, the board took action to approve the 9 days of training days for employees because of the COVID situation, which means that we went from 180 days down to 171 days. The board tabled the action to suspend the 180-day statute because there was an expectation that during this year there would be some continued negotiations with the teachers union around potentially cutting back those 9 days by changing the calendar to have non-instructional days changed for those instructional days. Therefore, the board has not taken action yet. At some point this year, my understanding is that yes, the board is going to have to take action, and we should talk about when that's the appropriate time, and we may want to talk to our legal counsel through the AG's office about the appropriate time to do that in light of now the overlay of these impending furloughs on top of the 9 instructional loss days.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any other questions or comments from board members about this? Board Member Voss?
Yeah, I want to follow up on your comment, Chair, and the superintendent's response, because I think that's really important in terms of why, at least I believe, the governor should immediately rescind the furlough directive and direct, or enable rather, the department and the board representative to resume midterm bargaining. With the kind of stress and anxiety that this has imposed, the reality is there's not going to be any negotiations to restore some of those instructional days. And if you recall, the reason that we declined to cut the instructional days last July was there was a hope or a belief that at least 3 and perhaps more of those instructional days could be restored. If this furlough directive can be rescinded and good faith negotiations can resume between the employer and the unions, I believe that a portion of those instructional days could be restored to our students, and that can only benefit our students. So again, I urge the governor to take that action to enable those days to be restored to our students.
Thank you, Mr. Voss. Any other comments from board members concerning this matter? Board Member Fallon?
Thank you, Chair Payne. Board Member Lynn Fallon. Superintendent, in the memo that the board sent with our chair put together with the different questions, and then your response related to waiving school days and student hours. So on the student hours issue and our authority and how we might go about doing this in terms of timing, and should we, in determining student hours, which are, I believe, statutorily set, in the current mode and over the next few months, because we're using distance learning, one of the testifiers asked a question about clarifying of how we count school hours for distance learning. Can you please clarify that as it relates to the student hours in the statute?
So thank you, Board Member Fallon, for that question. I'm going to ask if Rodney Luke is on the panel. He is the one best suited to help me answer this question.
He's on the panel, Superintendent.
Thank you. A.S. Luke?
Yeah, good afternoon. This is Rodney Luke. Can you hear me? Great question. So the way that the student hours now, and when I say now is calculated, is that we look at the hours in statute, and then we have the schools plan their daily schedules, and then from there we ensure that the hours are preserved. And again, it's when students are either in person as well as distance learning.
So, so the school hours, I believe it is at 1,040. I'm sorry, I can't remember.
1,080, yes.
1,080. So, as we move forward and we're looking at a potential waiver, I mean, there's a lot of discussion that has to be had in terms of clarifying. What I think I'm hearing you say is that with distance learning, the schools develop a schedule, and that schedule should reflect actual student hours, not just the schedule.
The hours are actually calculated within, yes, the school schedule. So, you know, students they have a start time and an end time. And if they're in distance learning, they do participate and engage within that time frame.
Okay, thank you. I'm asking because I'm very concerned, as we all are, about the impact to students in terms of actual learning time. And now faced with furloughs on top of distance learning, You know, we want to ensure that the students get the time that we are supposed to be providing them. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Rodney and Board Member Fallon. Yes, Rodney. Anybody else? Okay, I see 3 hands up. We're going to call first on, I'm going to ask AS Heidi Armstrong if she has any comments, and then I saw Student Rep Hunter's hand up and a couple other hands that went down. But Assistant Superintendent Armstrong, do you have any remarks on that last question?
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, I do. And this is in response to Board Member Fallen's question about the number of student hours. And it is very difficult in a virtual setting. Our current attendance guidance, and this is very different than how we've typically calculated the student hours from the start of the school day to the end of the school day times the number of school days in the year. But the question for us was, how do you do that when students are doing both synchronous and asynchronous lessons? Or they're in the school setting for some days and then, you know, virtual other days. So in our guidance, our attendance guidance, there are ways, and this has been a problem across the nation, and we pulled samples and coordinated with other states on how they're doing it. So it may not be a 7:45 to 2 o'clock straight hour calculation, but teachers are able to determine if it's asynchronous distance learning, they're able to determine how much time are they going to be face-to-face virtually with the students, and then if an assignment is given, because the students aren't going to be in front of the computer, you know, from 7:45 until 2, how many hours or minutes would that assignment take, and then create a schedule that would reflect that. And so the attendance guidance states and gives templates for ways to teachers to keep track of the number of hours that students are doing school with the combination of virtual face-to-face, asynchronous activities, and then, of course, when they're, if they are in school any days, including those hours in that daily and weekly schedule. So it's complicated and it's tricky, but there are ways to do it, and our guidance gives samples of that.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Heidi Armstrong. Board Member Fallon, did that help you with your question?
Yes, thank you. So if, for example, just so that I want to be sure I understand, because we are all very concerned about the amount of time that students are receiving based on what we are required to do and what's in the best interest of the children. So if a student is only doing, let's say, 1 hour of distance learning a day, or maybe 2 hours, how do we account for the remainder of the day? Is that based on, in the attendance guidebook, you have kind of a description of what the student might be doing on their own?
Yes, yes, and there should be a schedule that reflects from 7:40, I'm making this up, from 7:45 to 8:45, virtual lesson by the teacher, 8:45 to 11 o'clock, independent work on X assignment, 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock, regrouping, or small group A, B, and C, independent work for group, you know, D, E, and F, etc. So there is a way for accountability and to record how the instruction is taking place, whether it's in person, whether it's virtual, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous.
So how, is the principal monitoring the plan and the actual school hours that are being provided to students? How are we managing that? You know, I really do feel for our students, and I know we all do, as I've said, but this is key because now we're adding furloughs to the mix. And it is very, very troubling.
Yes, thank you, Board Member Fallon.
So who, I'm
Is-
sorry, Chair Payne, who's monitoring? That was my question.
Well, and I think principals monitor, but you're correct that schools do things differently, and that's part of the confusion, I guess. But I think we want to really focus on the furloughs as opposed to the attendance criteria that could get into the discussion later on. But I think that when we talk about the hours, certainly there is a relationship to furloughs because the hours will be less. But I think what you're asking for is really how do we identify whether students are present and getting the instruction as counted for a school day, because it is quite different.
Right, and how we're meeting what the number of hours we say we are. Thank you, I yield.
Okay, and I see Board Student Representative Harris has his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Just kind of going off of what Member Fallon had said about students completing their work in class and whether or not we know that they're in class or not during these times. Every school is doing it differently, and you know, right now, I feel like as a student going through school, it's definitely self-directed a lot of the time. So it's to the student's own self that they'll be kind of doing their work. I do really applaud our teachers on making our lessons interactive now online. You know, it's definitely a new experience. You know, they covered a lot of the things that I wanted to talk about, so that's really all I have to say about this. I yield the floor.
Thank you, Representative Harris. Board Member Asher.
Chair, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my question is really along the same lines that Board Member Fallon alluded to earlier. I think all of the board members are concerned about the bottom 20%, if not 50% of the kids that have struggled since March. So my concerns are really the students that had chronic absenteeism, especially because of the unreliable internet services and hotspots that they had throughout distance learning. And then there is another group of students who have struggled in their core classes and are now really behind on their credits and needing to catch up. And then the students who have all the special needs, who are behind in English, math, all of those core classes, with the hopes of going hybrid if it's happening next school year. I was really hopeful that that's going to help close in the gaps that we have created, that have been created through distance learning and all the challenges. But now we're talking about furloughs. And I'm not sure if I'm thinking along the same lines, but my fear is, will there be teachers that are going to work on the ground effortlessly to close in these gaps that we've identified over and over again? Will their hours be impacted? Those are my concerns. And I'm really fearful that next year, we're going to have a lot of kids that are actually going to lose credits and will fall behind and not graduate. I really, really hope that this furlough doesn't go through because our kids have gone through so much and the teachers have stuck through with them all those times and now this? I don't know. So I just wanted to say that. And I really, really hope that there is a prioritization on education. Because after everything that has happened, it's our children that will be impacted by these decisions. And they count on all of us to make those decisions for them. I yield.
Thank you, Board Member Asher. Board Member Nama'u.
Aloha, Board Member Kilina Ma'u here. Okay, Shanti, you started this, but you know, I'm just following up on what Shanti just, what Board Member Asher just shared. I am a little frustrated with how this all came about. You know, the board was never, we were never a part of these discussions, and I have concerns about that. So I'm really looking forward to meeting with the governor, and hopefully we'll have some dialogue here. But the public does need to know that the Board of Education does not sanction these furloughs. We do not believe in them, and we didn't have an opportunity to put any input into it. I realize that the governor has the authority to do what he needs to do because of the situation that we are in, emergency situations with the pandemic and everything. However, I wish he could have shown a little bit more restraint when it came to the department. If he could have just waited to see, I'm hoping that we will get funding from the federal government and that this can go away sooner if possible, and we'll get that kind of support that the schools will need, the public schools will need. And I was just hoping he would have shown some restraint there. I think, unfortunately, the damage is done already with many of our teachers. If you can see the testimony from people, from the teachers, this is hard times for them. They have been struggling. They have always been struggling. Before the pandemic, the teachers have been struggling. And we have asked enormous things from them to pivot, to create distance learning, to, you know, we've had a lot of meetings since the middle of summer addressing a lot of their concerns on safety, concerns on PPE, concerns on instructional time, for them to learn distance learning. And this is another thing that we got to just throw at them, that, oh, by the way, yeah, there's some furloughs here now. You know, the governor sees the department as being a little different. That's why he's only asking 1 day a month instead of 2 days like other departments. Yeah, the department is very, very different from other state departments. The Department of Education is our future. We're talking about our children here. And what happens to these children next year or even in the upcoming year? People, they're done. The teachers are done. They're looking for jobs elsewhere. They're looking to move back to the mainland. They're figuring it out that we have not given them the ho'ihi, the respect that we should all give them. How are we going to replace these high quality teachers? How is that going to happen? It's not. It's not going to happen instantly for sure. And I'm talking about, as Catherine had shared earlier, this is a generation that we're talking about here. We need to look at education differently in this state. And I'm just going to keep repeating this probably at every board meeting. The public and our legislators, everyone needs to take ownership of this. This isn't something that we can just band-aid with furloughs here and there. That's not going to do it. We have to invest in our kids. We have to invest in public education. We have to do it. And we have to take, I don't know, does it mean increasing taxes? Maybe that's what we have to do. I'm willing to do it. It's a hardship on all of us, but we have to start thinking about providing funding for the department in a different way. I really hope that our legislators are hearing this, and I really hope that they're thinking about things differently, about how we can move forward and how we can make public education a priority. Because what we spend on our kids now and invest in them now will save us millions and billions of dollars in the future. Because we will have a thriving economy from these students and less all kinds of other things that go bad in our society. And we all know what those are. But we need to support our students. And the first thing we need to do is by supporting the teachers who are, again, the most important thing in our department, because they are there firsthand directly with these students. So I'm so sorry, these are disjointed comments that I have, just mana'o here and there, all over the place. But I just think that one, the Board of Education needs to be involved further. Two, the governor really needs to look at this differently, and hopefully we'll have these dialogues with him. Three, I'm hoping and I am appealing to all those teachers out there who have heartfelt testimony, have given us heartfelt testimony, that if you will reconsider and just stay the course, and hopefully the state, the people, the public will be there to support you as well. And four, that everyone takes ownership of this situation. Everyone, the public needs to understand. And I look forward to the January meetings when we are going to see from every school the exact impact that things are going to happen in the next fiscal year and how that is going to determine the kinds of programs and teachers and activities that we are going to provide for our children. I yield.
Thank you, Board Member Namao. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Board Member Takeno?
Thank you, Board Chair. I just wanted to make a comment that I share all the frustrations that have been shared by my board colleagues. You know, we have been trying to communicate our desires and the outcomes we would have wanted to see, since the board has been, and the department and everybody in this state and the country has been dealing with this pandemic. But time and time again, it seems as though we are in the blind and we get caught off guard by actions that's being taken without our knowledge, without our consent, or even our input. And this is just another example of many that has come forward during this period of time. You know, while I see that this is largely in part being asked by the governor, the superintendent, through the testimonies we've heard and the evidence that was provided in the testimonies, clearly show that this is her plan. And this was not shared with the board. So with that, everything that has occurred today, there's one person who should take full responsibility. Because again, we did not know anything, and we are being provided with information that is always after the fact and after we could even understand what the plan is or even provide input and or comment to it. So Again, I hold the leader accountable for what we're dealing with today, and I expect a lot more and a lot better. And that would I yield the floor.
Okay, the plan that was shared, as I recall, was shared with us in executive session, but I think none of us expected it to hit this hard. Furloughs have been discussed by the governor since the reality of the pandemic was hitting us. But as board members have said, they were not discussed with us. And I do need to say that I know that the superintendent and the governor have been in communication, and because of her advocacy, he has reduced the furloughs. And I believe just in his mind, that's supporting the Department of Education and the teachers and the kids. But like other board members, I just despair at the future of public education, and I don't believe we can continue to take the hits that we're taking and pretend that our system will not be dramatically and adversely affected. I've been looking for any more hands up to make comments, and seeing none. Any last words from board members? I think we probably said everything we could say. Superintendent, if you would like to say anything, or Deputy Superintendent, feel free to let me know, Superintendent.
Thank you, Board Chair. I just thank the board members and members of the public and everyone that is standing up for public education to continue to work together. It is so important to have a unified voice, and I will certainly be accountable for my leadership, but I cannot do this alone. This is a unified effort, and I do appreciate all of the voices, including our labor unions, who are going to be speaking on behalf of their members. But the fact is, at the end of the day, we need better funding for public education that's predictable and that is adequate. And we have not figured out that solution, which is why the state is in this situation again. And we all need to be all hands on the table to figure this out. I don't think there's an easy solution. But the fact is, our kids are the ones that are going to pay for it, and our teachers and their incredible capacity, along with our principals and every staff member, are the ones that are going to lose out. And they really do deserve their pay. They deserve predictability, and they also deserve all the respect that I absolutely have for them. And I know that we all have for our staff, and deep, deep appreciation. Mahalo.
Okay, with that, so thank you, Superintendent. I'll let you have the last word on that, and appreciate your words very much. We're now going to move on, and we have action items 6A. So that's where we are now in our agenda. This is action on the findings and recommendations of the investigative committee, which was tasked with developing the board's legislative policy positions and drafting any legislative reports due to the board for the 2021 legislature. The committee has recommended the adoption of the policy positions and the approval of the legislative report attached to the committee's memorandum in the meeting materials. Pursuant to the Sunshine Law, as you recall, we did not deliberate or act on the investigative committee's recommendations at the same meeting in which the committee reported their findings and recommendations. So we are going to do that now. And sorry, I need to call up that agenda item. So I need to have a motion to approve the committee's recommendations on page 3 of the memorandum. And then I'll need a second, and then we can discuss it. So if I could have a motion for this agenda item. Not seeing any hands yet. I'm sure there'll be one. Board Member Bakarse.
Aloha, Board Member Kamau Bakarsi. I move to adopt the board policy positions for the 2021 legislative session attached as Exhibit A to Investigative Committee Chairperson Catherine Payne's memorandum dated December 3rd, 2020, and 2, to approve the board's annual report on charter schools pursuant to Section 302D-21 HRS and as attached as Exhibit B to Investigative Committee Chairperson Catherine Payne's memorandum dated December 3rd, 2020.
Thank you very much. Board Member Cox.
Second.
Okay, so we can now discuss this item. We did not discuss our legislative priorities last time. We just presented them. So if there's any discussion on them, now is the time. Starting on page 7 of our document. Board Member Uemura, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair Payne. I just was looking at the high testimony, and there was a recommendation that they made, which I thought was that we should consider, and that is the board supports proposed legislation that preserves funding and resources for high-need students, those who are economically disadvantaged, English learners, and students receiving special education services. So I think the board should consider adding that as one of our third policy position.
Okay, I'm scrolling just a minute here. So we have policy positions on the Department of Education, on the libraries policy, on charter school, and general policy positions. So where would you add this into the general policy positions?
It's under, actually, they were talking about where the Board of Education supports proposed legislation that preserves funding and resources for student learning. That's one. The second one was the board supports proposed legislation that fulfills the needs identified in the department's board approved biennial operating capital improvement and program budget requests for
Right.
school years.
So that's what I'm reading. So where would you like to place your recommendation under Department of Education policy or under general policy positions? Because you're asking us to add a policy here, I mean a position here regarding the special needs students. I think you need to unmute yourself, Vice Chair.
Sorry, I think I was rustling too much paper, so I was muted. So yeah, I'm actually going through and to see exactly where it should be. But if you can continue the discussion, Chair, then I can come back to you. And that way I don't hold up any discussions.
Okay, are there any other comments? And because we'll need to vote on Vice Chair Uemura's suggestion regarding the most vulnerable and special needs populations in our schools.
Yeah, and I think, Chair, I think under the DOE would be fine.
Okay, so you need to provide some language again for that.
Okay, I'm just reading off the testimony that came to this meeting, and the language is the board supports. The third policy would be under the Department of Education. The third policy, the board supports proposed legislation that preserves funding and resources for high-need students, those who are economically disadvantaged, English learners, and students receiving special education services.
Okay, so those are what we've sort of put them in the category of vulnerable learners, and that includes all of those students that you described. Do other board members have a comment on this to support this suggestion before we bring it up as a motion? Is that an important issue? Board Member Bakarsi?
I also support that motion, and if it requires it, I second the motion.
Yeah, I don't think he's quite made a motion yet, but it's a proposal is out there, but would you like to have that be a motion, Vice Chair Uemura?
Yes, I would.
All right, so we have Board Member Bakarse seconding it. And this would be to amend our policy positions by adding the language that you have just identified there. And Board Member Cox, we can discuss this now. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, on the first one, I just lost it. Supports proposed legislation that preserves funding and resources for student learning, especially our vulnerable students. And that way you don't have to write up a whole new thing. That's my only comment.
Oh, okay, so you're suggesting we just add to that language to highlight the most vulnerable students?
Yes, that was my suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further discussion from other board members on making sure that issue gets included? Board Member Takeno?
Thank you, Board Chair. While I acknowledge all the comments that are being made, sometimes I don't know what vulnerable learners could include. So I think maybe to make it a little bit more explanatory, could we say for our vulnerable learners or whatever is termed, including but not limited to high need students, those who are economically disadvantaged, English learners, and students receiving special education services. So it emphasizes that it categorizes all of them, and then it could be all of the following.
Okay, so be very explicit in the language. Vice Chair Uemura, do you see that addition to the policy position, which is the first one, just adding the language that we have been discussing?
Yes, in fact, I'm in agreement with Board Member Takeno. I too have sometimes don't recall exactly what it means. So I think by specifying that and putting it into the first policy, I think we can accomplish the intent.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so we have been discussing this motion, tweaking it a little bit, but I think it's still the same motion where we would add language to the very first legislative policy position that would include the statement following classroom level, where we would say specifying vulnerable learners as a priority, and vulnerable learners is defined as economically disadvantaged, ELL students, special needs students, and was there anything else? It was special needs, economically disadvantaged, ELL.
Students receiving special education services.
Okay, students receiving special education services. Okay, so that's in there. We can't do it on a whiteboard or anything, but you can see where it is on your memo, and we'll have the staff add that in. Any other comments about that? Dwight, Board Member Takeno? Okay, not him. Okay, let me check if there's any other comments. All right, so we need to, first we need to vote on I'm looking for my people who tell me if I'm on the right track with Robert's rules, but any board member that can correct me. But my understanding is we need to get a motion. We have a motion, so we need to vote on the amended version of our legislative policy positions. And I think that we can do that. We need to state the amendment and vote on the amendment, and then vote on the amended main motion. Okay, so the amendment is that in that first section there, the Board of Education supports proposed legislation that preserves funding and resources for student learning at the classroom level, including our most vulnerable students who are economically disadvantaged, receiving special education services, receiving services for English language learners, and yeah, I think that's it. So that is our amended motion. So I will call for the roll call vote on that amendment, and then we will have it again for the full motion, for the full item. So Board Vice Chair Uemura.
Aye.
Amendment, okay. Board Member
Aye.
Asher.
Aye.
Board Member Bakarse.
Aye.
Board Member Cox.
Aye.
Board Member Fallon.
Aye.
Board Member Nama'u.
Aye.
Board Member Takeno.
Aye.
And Board Member Voss. Okay, so
Aye.
the amendment is approved. Now we need to vote on the full motion, which was stated earlier with that amendment. So I will call the roll again. And Vice Chair Uemura.
Aye.
Board Member Asher.
Aye.
Board Member Bakarse.
Aye.
Board Member Cox.
Aye.
Board Member Fallon.
Aye.
Board Member Nama'u.
Aye.
Board Member Takeno.
Aye.
And Board Member Voss.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. The motion has been approved. So we are now to the last action item, which is board action on the superintendent's evaluation for the 2020-2021 school year, superintendent's priorities and strategic plan indicator targets. I'd like to ask Superintendent Kishimoto to share her proposed superintendent priorities and strategic plan targets. So go right ahead, Superintendent.
Mahalo, Chair Payne and members of the public joining the board today for this conversation. Just as very quick background, I'm not going to go through all of it, but you do have the memo with the details. There are 3 components to the superintendent's evaluation plan as approved by the board. The first one is the 5 professional standards, which remains the same: the visionary leadership and org culture, operations, resources, and personnel management is second. The third standard is board governance and policy. The fourth is communication, community relations, and the fifth is equity advocacy. The second component of the evaluation are the superintendent's priorities, and I'll speak about that in a moment. And the third component of the superintendent's evaluation is the department's progress towards meeting the annual targets of the strategic plan indicators. I'm going to skip to the third page of the memo relating to the superintendent's priorities. The board asked me to focus the priorities or rewrite the priorities based on SMART goals. And so what I have before you are 2 superintendent priorities. The first focus on the school year of 2020-21 to accelerate the department's digital transformation as measured by decreases in the access gap. And there are 2 specific metrics there, 4.7 for device gap and 13.8% for the connectivity gap. This represents a 50% reduction from quarter 4. I used quarter 4 because quarter 4 was the time period in which we collected data from every single principal across the entire state. We did not collect that at the start of this academic year. We do have survey information from parents, but that's not, again, it's a survey format, so it's a representative group. The quarter 4 information is from every single school. And so what I'm looking to do is to focus on a 50% reduction in the device gap and connectivity gap using quarter 4 data and end of quarter 4 So that this was collected at the end of after Q4 and compare that to the end of this school year and reducing that. The Superintendent Priority 2 that I have before you is, again, for this academic year of 2020-21 to promote innovative strategies to improve literacy at all grade levels as measured by decreases in the language arts gap. And you see the 3 metrics there so that we are measuring the improvement through a decrease in the gap for the elementary, middle, and high school level. And noted in the next page of the memo on page 5, you will see the descriptors for each of those indicators and how they were calculated. The other piece that I am bringing back so that we're sure that we have clarity about all the components of the plan is the indicator targets. The proposed strategic plan indicators are consistent with the metrics that we are monitoring year over year. But what I did was take out the indicators or the metrics that we will not have data for because of SBA or the Smarter Balance Assessment not being administered. That leaves us 9 metrics. There are additional metrics related to school climate, family engagement, and family engagement that I also removed because they are reliant on a definition of the student and family experience in the classroom. And so those metrics don't align well with the situation that we're in. The chronic absenteeism nationally, because nationally we are part of ongoing dialogue around how to measure and think about and respond to what is expected to be an increase in chronic absenteeism. This is also a conversation at the US DOE level. We know that metric is not going to go down as we would like to see. And that's a direct result of the pandemic. But we do know that absenteeism and attendance are critical for us to keep improving throughout the year. And it's a high priority for us. And so what I am recommending there is that metric for this year alone be focused on average daily attendance, because we'll be able to measure the work that we in fact can have impact on. With chronic absenteeism, early on, if we surpass that 15, well, actually it would be the 15% minus the 2% that we had hoped to decrease this year if it was a normal year. That 13% chronic absenteeism is not likely to be met. We'll be above it and we'll be monitoring that. But the place where we have the impact on controlling the rate of chronic absenteeism is in looking at average daily attendance. And so I'm recommending that in place of chronic absenteeism. In addition to that is the metrics that the board has previously approved with inclusion rate, 9th grade on track, high school graduation, career and technical education concentrated, college going, graduates, teacher positions filled, teacher retention, and repair and maintenance backlog. So I'm presenting to the board for your conversation consideration both the 2 SMART goals for the superintendent priorities and the metrics related to the strat plan indicators.
Thank you, Superintendent. Board members, do you have comments or questions? Yes, Board Member Cox.
Thank you, Chair. Cox here. I have several questions. Okay, on priority 1, you're going to go back and get this data from all schools again to get these percentages?
No, we have that data. That was the data that was collected right after the school year ended. We had delayed collecting that data until Q4 was done because of the pandemic.
No, but what I mean is you're going to do it again at the end of this school year so that you know if you've gotten better?
Well, now we are monitoring and collecting that data and working with principals already. So we now have that in place because this was also discussed by the board as being a priority area for us to monitor. So yes, we will continue to collect that information and have a year end to compare.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we're having a year-end amount so that we know that. Okay, second question is on priority 2, and it has to do with grades for kids. And so, for example, at the end of first quarter, I was at one of our high schools, and so any senior that had an F, they were having them come do extra so that they could catch them up, because graduation rates are very important for those kids. So at the end, we're at the end of the semester. So will we be able to get grades for all of our schools in January?
So we will have in
grades,
January.
I mean the number of seniors and the number of 8th graders that are failing, that are not moving on unless something is done.
Oh, so a mid-year report on progress, yes.
Yes, okay, because that's going to be really important to be on top of it. And so, because I'm really concerned that our graduation rate is going to go down, and even with our 8th graders moving up to 9th grade. And the last thing I wanted to ask about is that as I've talked with some people, and I'm an ex-principal, so I like that you gave the schools and the principals the responsibility for making a lot of these decisions. But some of the things that I'm getting is that maybe there should have been a little more top down, because nobody's been in a pandemic before. And what I'm hearing is some schools do online teaching 4 hours a day, some do 6 hours a day, some do 1 hour a day, and then they're counting the time that the kids are working on their own as, you know, part of the hours. And there's really no way of knowing how much these kids are working. So I guess I'm wanting to have a little more structured so that all of our schools, yes, they have to make decisions, but there needs to be some minimum time that they need to be spending with kids. And if we're going to be moving more kids back into school, that'll be helpful. But then again, it'll depend on their communities. There may be some that may have to continue only virtual because there's so many illnesses in their communities. So I guess I'm wanting for you to have more minimums that have to be done so that we know kids are getting enough hours. And we're never going to be able to calculate, you know, the exact number of hours, 1,080 hours that these kids are getting, because a lot of it has to be done virtually. But there's a big difference in having teachers online with kids up and down for 6 hours or for 1 hour. And so I'm having concerns about that principals have had a difficult time making all of these decisions. So I think I'm just asking if there could be a little more work with them to make sure that, since we are a state system, that we have a little more systematic addressing of the hours and the time that we're spending. And I know that some of the schools I visited, the teachers are going way above and beyond and working really hard with their students. But I just want to make sure that everywhere is done like that. And so I yield. Thank you. And Suk, if you have anything you'd like to say to that, I'll be happy to listen.
So thank you, Board Member Cox. You know, that's certainly a concern we all have. We did model ourselves with other districts nationally and have been part of Core Collaborative to continue looking at how to best support schools in providing guidance around this exact issue of how much time is recommended for online direct instruction versus asynchronous time, asynchronous instruction, and independent work time. And we do have guidance out of the Curriculum and Instruction Office that every school has. And we also have what's called the Deputies Roundtable that has representatives from the principals at the elementary, middle, and high school that get together with deputy once a month to talk about topics like this. And they help us set or reset or clarify guidance. So we'll continue to work on that. I think we're all concerned about what we're going to see coming out of this year with all of the interruptions, and also knowing that this is the first time that we've instructed using so many varied approaches using technology. So thank you.
Well, that kind of a follow-up, has there been any request to the CASs that they check and see what minimum time is going on with teaching in their schools?
Yeah, so the CASs are part of that conversation, and we have also a separate leadership meeting between CASs and ASs around these topics. The kind of things that we are asking the CASs to do follow up on because it impacts, it's about schools directly and instruction, and the kind of feedback that the CASs are giving to us as the leadership team at the AS and superintendent level around the things that they're asking us for more centralized decision making or clarity that they need to make sure that we do have this consistency. So it is a back and forth that we have continuously.
Okay, great. Because what I know is from my own experience, if I get asked questions about what I'm doing stuff, then I'm going to be a lot more careful. So I like it that there's those conversations going on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Cox and Superintendent. And I saw that we have some board members' hands up and also Deputy Unibasami's hands up, but I need to confess that I forgot to ask for a motion before we started this discussion. So I'm just going to correct that now, and then we'll get back into the discussion. So may I please have a motion to approve the superintendent's priorities and strategic plan indicators, and then we'll get back into the discussion. So looking for a helpful hand to do this for me, please. Board Member Vice Chair Uemura.
Thank you, Chair. I make a motion to approve the superintendent's priorities and strategic plan indicator targets for 2020-2021.
Thank you. And Board Member Asher.
I second.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I apologize. So now we are back into the discussion, and I saw Board Member Fallon and Board Member or Deputy Unibasami's hand up. Deputy, did you want to add to anything the superintendent had said?
Yes, I actually thank you. This is Deputy Unibasami, and I just want to say that we have been conducting school visits, but in the conversation with the CASs so far, part of the exploration is really what are we finding out about instructional hours and how schools are setting up and monitoring what's happening in their schools. And basically what I've been finding is that the schools are it really is dependent on the school model and what they've set up in terms of either rotation or how they're using the school day. They are very aware of the instructional hours. And what I'm finding is that most of the schools are trying to stay with not only what they claimed that what they said was going to be the school model, but also the school schedule that was advertised and shared with their school community. And if you think about the high school, there's course schedules and how many and the classes that the students are taking. And so the schools are really trying to stay in that venue. The variation that might be visible to the public is the amount of time that is perceived that the student is online in front of a computer with a teacher. However, just like our jobs, we're not always on the computer, but we are still working. And so that's one of the things that I'm finding out. So please know that please know that we are checking it and exploring with the CASs and the school visits are examples of what the schools are doing. But when I asked the question, is that across the complex area? Has that been an expectation? The answer is yes.
Okay, thank you for adding to that in response to Board Member Cox's question. Board Member Fallon, followed by Board Member Asher.
Thank you, Board Member Cox, for emphasizing the importance of understanding what's happening at the school level related to school hours. This is, something that whether it's attendance or absenteeism, it's really about students in school learning. And so it's just a theme that I think I looked at and the evidence that tells us. And so some of that is related to use of metrics. And that's why I'm focusing on our statutory mandate of 1,080 hours. And as we move forward, especially if we're going to be asked to waive school hours in any way, it would be really important for me as a board member to feel that there's a system in place so that if we say a student is, if it's 900 hours or whatever it is, that I can feel confident that that's actually happening. And so I just want to emphasize once again Maggie's concerns and solutions that you can propose and any recommendations for strengthening that area, especially if we have to waive in the future. I did have a question about the chronic absenteeism, and the superintendent had provided clarification of why. I'm wondering, Superintendent, if you could just explain a little further how this is connected to what's happening nationally. And because this particular area, chronic absenteeism, especially for that high need population, whether we're in a pandemic year or not, is a concern. Because it's once again going back to the amount of time kids are in school or participating in a learning activity and learning.
Thank you for that question and comment. You're absolutely correct. This is a national agenda as well as a local priority as approved by the board, that chronic absenteeism is an important measure for us. And so we will be reporting on this metric. And so the reporting will continue. I am asking for consideration relative to the link to my evaluation. Where I can have impact is on average daily attendance. The chronic absenteeism conversation nationally right now is around how that shows up on various, many states across the nation have it on its accountability plan that's been approved by the Department of Education. And so the Department of Education right now, the US Department of Education is having conversations around several of these measures and metrics because they expect that, or they can see that because of the health pandemic, we can expect either the metric not to be a measure that can be collected this year, or the metric is a metric that we expect is likely not to improve as reflected in state accountability plans. So they're having those conversations. Chronic absenteeism is one of those conversations, as well as state assessments and where US DOE wants to go with any flexibilities under the new administration. that they want to have around this. Those conversations are largely small group conversations with various professional organizations representing state and district superintendents at this point, since the Biden transition team is the one that's leading those conversations, and there is an existing US DOE team that has already stated there are no additional waivers or considerations at this point. So we're kind of in between. So that was the comment I was making about the national level conversations. It's still absolutely a key and important metric, and we will continue to report on it.
And so internally, are you continuing to, because first of all, the dashboard you put together, the interactive dashboard is very well done, and I really do like it. And on that, on metric 7, you know, which is what we adopted, as you said, we talk about high risk attendance. And,
yes.
And there you've identified 18% or 28,375 students are at risk of chronic absenteeism. That's a large number of students. And I do not want to lose that group. I know it's a tough year, but you know, every day is critical. And so if you're saying that you will continue to monitor and collect that data, I'd be very happy to hear that.
So yes, not only do we monitor and collect it, the leadership groups that I mentioned, such as the Deputies Roundtable, the CASs, or in fact, every single principal throughout the state, they get their data and they're asked to then revisit the strategies that they're using to address chronic absenteeism and what they're seeing in daily average attendance. And also, even within the school day, if a student is showing up for some classes and we can see a trend that some of them are not showing up for other classes, that they are shifting strategies in real time to make sure that that they are addressing what the data is showing in terms of student attendance. We all agree, and the leadership team is right on top of this, and I'd like to say they're all over this. We are constantly meeting at the complex and school level to talk about that data, but also to strategize around it. That includes reaching out and sharing strategies around how we engage parents and families and advocates for students who are supported by advocates around making sure they're showing up every day for their scheduled time. But it's, you know, I want to be clear, it is all over the place. And we continue to look at how do we create a more consistent learning experience for students, and our teachers are doing a great job adjusting their strategies, and principals are doing a great job in monitoring and responding to this data. And we're going to have to stay on top of this every day, every week throughout this entire year because of all of the interruptions to our families' lives and to how education is being delivered. So yes, the answer is a resounding yes. We are on top of this and responding to it.
So you will be continuing to post on the dashboard that metric 7?
No, we will.
Okay.
So yes, the metric doesn't change. The dashboard does not change. That data still has to be fully understood so that we can keep talking about what's happening and why that data is either going up or down or becoming flat.
Thank you. I yield.
Okay, we have Board Member Asher followed by Board Member Uemura.
Yeah, I just wanted to add another factor that is worth considering, maybe just a suggestion as far as absenteeism. For one child, if they're present in another class, but consecutively and constantly missing one, maybe another thing to look at is the teacher and how they are trying to provide equity in that student's participation as well. Because I know that many students are also very intimidated or they're just shy and they're not as actively participating in class unless they are unless they feel that they are being treated equally as every other child. So I think that's something that is also worth considering in looking at absenteeism, looking at it both ways.
Thank you, Board Member Asher. You're absolutely right about that. There's the connections that are made by individual teachers and how those follow-throughs happen, and that's why the tracking of the daily attendance and also what kind of trends we're seeing in the attendance behaviors of individual students is really important and very informative. And at the secondary level, since the students have multiple classes, multiple teachers, the way we collect attendance is for not only the day, but it's for each individual class as well. So that gives us that information by teacher, by grade level, by content area.
Okay, thank you very much. Board Vice Chair Uemura.
Thank you, Chair Payne. Superintendent, I thank you for doing the priority 1 and 2 in the SMART goals. I did a spreadsheet on it to make sure that we got all the letters included in there, so I thank you for that. And so, one of the things that, since the board approved of the priorities, one of the things I wanted to get is get comfortable with the targets and your indicators. And so as I was going through testimony, Shari Nakamura and her group anyway came up with testimony on the priorities and also the chronic absenteeism and daily average daily attendance. So I wanted to first check with you to get your response to that, and to see, are you familiar with that testimony, Superintendent, or any of your ASs are?
No, I'm familiar with it. I look at
Okay.
testimony.
Okay, so, and what I wanted to do was, because there are several things in there that was mentioned, and I wanted you to respond to that, because I wanted to get a better understanding, to see if you agree or disagree, or, how that can be supported or not. So if you don't mind, if you can do that. And on priority 1, it talked about maybe the metric calculation should start from Q1 of this year versus Q4 of last year. And the reasoning is that the department did not have complete and accurate information about devices and connectivity in Q4. So, and I know that said, they had also mentioned that they had asked for that information in a letter dated April 27, 2020. The information was not given, so the assumption was that you don't have that data. So maybe Q1 would be the quarter you start with, because then you would have accurate data from Q1 versus Q4 of last year. Would that be a correct assumption, Superintendent?
So, Board Member Uemura,
Yes.
the proposal I've put before you is based on the conversations I've had with the board, as well as the board's adopted metrics, the board's conversation with me about the gap measures. So everything I've proposed is tied back to action the board has taken, and also what I've presented to the board. And so I would like to stay focused on that. The data from the Q4 that if I've stated that we should start with in the metric that I'm proposing with Q4, it's because we in fact have comprehensive data from the Q4. If I've stated that it's in the first quarter, it's because the data was not available until Q1. So that's how I went through and made sure that all of that data was verified. I went through and met with my own data team to make sure that the data is available and that I'm representing it accurately. So I like I said, I sat with my entire data team, and we also cross-referenced everything with previous board agendas. The data from the evaluation for the superintendent also begins in July 1st and goes all the way through June 30th, as you're aware. And so I'm also looking to capture as much comprehensive information and data from that time period, which does include the work that was completed effective July 1, which includes part of our summer school and the lead up into first quarter. If you want more of the kind of one by one, I can do that. But again, that's the approach I used with what I presented to the board.
Okay, so just to be clear, Superintendent, and I know on the gaps, we did agree on that. So I'm not really questioning the gaps. I'm really questioning how the data was obtained to determine the gap. So I think what you're telling me now is that Q4 of last year, you did have complete and accurate information as a Q4. Is that correct?
For the indicators that I started or went back to Q4, if I started with Q1, it's because those measures are really being captured and collected as of Q1 because of those board conversations about those measures and metrics being important for school reopening, for example. So some of those things we put in place this school year, effective Q1. And so that's how those are distinguished. But where there's data where I can start from where we ended last year. So when I say Q4, it's after the school year has ended. So right. it's complete, after Q4. So it's not during Q4. So it is data that's available and comprehensive as of that point. So I'm trying to just capture as completed data from that point to the end of this school year where that is available. And if it's not available into Q1, I started at Q1, which is when the instructional year started for this year, as opposed to the July 1 timeline.
Yes, thank you for that explanation, but I just wanted to confirm that what you're telling me is that in the priority 1, Q4 of last year, you had complete and accurate information. And I think that's what you're telling me. That's correct. That's what you're telling me.
Yes, for devices and connectivity, we collected that information in May after the school year has started.
Okay. I don't want to belabor it. I just wanted to get a yes because in a testimony, they thought that maybe Q1 would have been a better quarter. So, but if you're saying Q4, you got all the information, then how you determine the gap is fine. And regarding priority 2, the comment there was that not all of the grades were received in Q1. Therefore, a better comparison would be where students got 100% receiving grades, which would be Q2. How would you respond to that? Is that the same thing you thought Q1, that you had all of the 100% of the students receiving grades in Q1?
No, it's grades don't necessarily work that way. For some of the grades, they do work on a quarter by quarter basis. And when you start getting into the secondary level, you have some semester by semester information. So the quarter by quarter data calculation there about the decrease in that language arts gap was based on looking at what data is available each quarter throughout the year. If we wanted to move to a semester by semester, that's also an appropriate way of doing it. Either way can be done, but I would have to recalculate the metrics, the actual measures. Yeah.
Okay, so you've been pretty consistent in how you're doing this. is what
Right,
what
right.
you're saying. Okay. And I think that's all, the board can ask, consistency and to make sure that you're using complete and accurate data. And I think that's what you're telling us. So let me go on to the last one, which is the going back to the chronic absenteeism. And this is the thing that I know Member Fallon and Member Asher had touched upon. And one of the things that was brought up in the testimony, as you know, chronic absenteeism is a measure of how many students miss a defined number of school days. And you also mentioned that the board has been concerned about that because chronic absenteeism is associated with a number of negative consequences for students, including low achievement, disengagement from school, cost failure, and increased risk of dropping out. Versus the average daily attendance measures the average number of students show up in any given day. So they also mentioned that this measure does not meet the meaningful differentiation requirement in ESSA. Additionally, average daily attendance masks which students are at risk of academic failure due to chronic absenteeism. And I think this was a focal point of board members Fallon's questions. So, for those reasons, when I look at this, and I know you mentioned that it's in, I guess, your dashboard, but I like to see it, and I like to see the chronic absenteeism stay as part of your priorities. And also on your table, repair and maintenance backlog. That's one of the things that I was not in favor of when it was first put in many years ago, I guess 3-4 years ago, because you really don't have control of that because it's really how much money you're allocated. And at the last go around, we actually changed the definition of repair and maintenance. So, my suggestion would be to take it out. I would remove that. And if you wanted to add something else to satisfy, you can include average daily attendance and include absenteeism to replace the repair and maintenance backlog. And you can, if there's a concern about in the pandemic, just put an asterisk on it. And I think all of the board members understand that. But I think what member Fallon mentioned, that's critical for us. We need to know those students that may be, we need to keep track of those students. So if you want to respond to that, I'm okay. I mean, I'm more information gathering at this point.
This is Catherine before the superintendent responds. I believe what I heard her say earlier is since this is part of her evaluation, that the indicators should be things that she has control over, that the chronic absenteeism is part of the dashboard and it is data that is being collected, but it is not part of her evaluation indicators, because that is something that, because of the pandemic, she doesn't really have control over. So that was the point I think she was making. And Superintendent, if you want to clarify, or if I misspoke here, please tell me, but that's what I believe I heard you say.
That's absolutely accurate. It is part of the ESSA requirement of our report. So we will report it, chronic absenteeism, as part of the ESSA reporting, and we'll also report it as part of the dashboard that the board members, that the board approved metrics for, which includes chronic absenteeism. Chronic absenteeism right now, our goal for this year, if we had continued as we continued based on the ESSA metrics that we filed with USDOE, is for us to decrease from 15% to 13%. We are already at 18%. Once you establish a threshold of chronic absenteeism early in the year, that you can't improve it. You can try to flatline it, but you can't improve it. So we're never going to be lower than 18% for this year. We've already missed that metric. So it does not make sense for me to put it in my evaluation. It does make sense to continue to reported on the ESTA requirement and the dashboard, and to continue to be part of that national dialogue. What I do have control of is the average daily attendance and continuing to use strategies with principals to try to improve that throughout the entire year.
Well, thank you, Superintendent. It does make sense to me, but just taking it one step forward, I'm not sure if the average daily attendance is meaningful to us. Just based on what the definition is. And just to bring it one step further, you don't have control of repair and maintenance backlog, but you have it as an indicator.
Yeah,
So,
and I appreciate you raising that, because I have control of executing on the dollars that are released to us
right
throughout the year, and they're not released all at once. So I know we have talked about whether that shows up again on an ongoing dashboard, because we should be tracking that, or whether that should remain on a metric. Now, we had the discussion, but the board, I don't think, took any action one way or the other. And so, again, that really is a good point to raise at this point in terms of, is there a way to represent the progress on repair and maintenance on the superintendent's evaluation that makes sense in terms of the metric, which right now is really driven by release of dollars from Budget and Finance Office.
Yeah, I agree, Superintendent, and my feelings on this. I don't think it should be part of your target because you have no control over it. So if there's anything that you could do is to take that off. And so thank you for your responses to my questions, and I appreciate that. And I think we're ready to move forward. Thank you, Superintendent. I yield the floor, Chair.
Thank you for your feedback.
Are there any other board members? Board Member Voss?
Thank you, Chair. Superintendent, I do tend to agree with you on the chronic absenteeism. While I agree completely with Board Member Fallon, it's a critical indicator. It's just simply not a comparable situation, and putting numbers in here would not be meaningful. If we're going to put numbers in your evaluation, they have to be meaningful, which kind of gets to my question. We've had the conversation in the context of the strategic plan of the difference between sort of stretch goals and realistic goals. And I want to direct your attention to teacher retention first. That's a number we've really struggled to increase, as I'm sure you know, over the years. You have it as a target difference of 3 percentage points. Similarly, on inclusion rate, another critical piece for the board as we begin our improvement on special ed, you have another 3 percentage points up to 47%. And, I would love to see that. That would be wonderful if that happened and we continued that progress. But I want to be asking you bluntly, are those targets realistic in this environment this year?
So in terms of teacher retention, we are, because of a combination of factors, doing much better with teacher retention this year than we have had in previous years. Part of it is just the economic reality and individuals maybe delaying some decisions. I don't know what this will look like, as we continue through this year with the furlough conversations and the budget outlook, and whether that'll impact this year's numbers. I'm sorry, I'm trying to look at data while I'm talking to you, so I apologize. But I think there are the reality of those impacts. I do think we will improve teacher retention. Whether we can reach a 3% increase in 1 year is the big question. That was what the board had said, in conversation, certainly with me, as we looked at several out years. In terms of the second metric, I'm sorry, the second metric, remind me what the second metric was, I'm
It
sorry.
was the 3% point increase on the inclusion rate, Superintendent.
Sorry, that's what happens when you're trying to read data and try to talk at the same time. The 3% inclusion rate is driven by the work that happens through IEPs, and so we are going full speed ahead. I want to keep the inclusion rate certainly at that level of expectation because I'm not sure if we'll be able to meet it. We have lots of challenges, but we are working really hard to make sure we don't lose ground because it is the IEP that's driving that, and it is about the best practice of providing inclusive settings even online, right? So it can still be provided. So I would say, yes, we should continue with the inclusion rate. I think the teacher retention rate looks better this year. Whether 3% is realistic, I appreciate the conversation we can have around that because that may be too much of a reach for this year, knowing that the rest of the year with all the challenges of conversations on funding, may have a tremendous impact on that.
And I understand all that, Superintendent, but I guess my point is these are the numbers that you be evaluated on, and the board will, and I'm sure you expect the board will hold them to you. So I just want to be sure that you are comfortable that these numbers are achievable.
So I am comfortable continuing to reach for that inclusion rate. I think the teacher retention rate is, again, it's improving, but if we overlay the situation we're in, yes, I understand being held to that, and I don't know that I can be confident that with all the unknowns, that 3%, which is a big jump in any given year, is realistic. And so if you're giving me the room to have the conversation, then I would say we may want to scale that indicator back. I'm just not comfortable. I'm not comfortable scaling back the inclusion rate. I think that we should be able to meet that rate. I think we are still making really good progress on pushing that. The teacher retention rate, again, I would like to then talk about that consideration to scale that expectation back, knowing that we have to continue to address that in future years.
Thank you, Superintendent. I yield, Chair.
Thank you. Are there others who would like to make comments about this? I'm hearing from Vice Chair Uemura the recommendation that we remove the R&M backlog, and from Board Member Voss and the Superintendent that perhaps the teacher retention rate of 3% increase is too optimistic and that should be scaled back. If we're going to make these changes, we need to withdraw and present a new motion. Those are the only changes that I have noted through the discussion, other than the issue of chronic absenteeism versus the average daily attendance. And I do believe the superintendent has clarified that the average daily attendance is what she has an opportunity to influence, because that is a changing number throughout the year. The chronic absenteeism has already been defined as 18%, and there is no opportunity to address that, although it will continue to be part of our work. And I'm being told that we don't actually have to withdraw the motion. We can just make a motion to amend. But is that in general what people and the superintendent would support, the removal of repair and maintenance as an indicator and the um, lowering of teacher retention. Superintendent, do you have a number there? Like, would it be 2%? Oh,
Yes, my recommendation would be to continue progress at 2% rate.
okay. So any other comments here? Because we're going to need to amend the motion. Okay, Vice Chair Umar, you have your hand up. Go right ahead.
Chair Payne, I guess what I'm struggling with is, I can see us amending her strategic plan indicators on those items in which she has no control. So I'm okay with that. So I'm willing to support that. But I think if we go ahead and, as an example, use a teacher retention and say, well, we're going to reduce that number from the number that she proposed to us. I don't think I can go along with that, because if there's a concern because of the pandemic and the furloughs and things of that sort, you can always explain that, right? She's going to be valuable, but you can explain that why she didn't make 58%. But I don't want us to go backwards. I think we need to have that as a target that she can control. So anything that she can control should be left in there. What she can't control should be taken out.
And just for my own clarification, she can't control the repair and maintenance backlog because that depends on the allocation that comes from the legislature and the government.
That's correct. And like the superintendent correctly said, she can control once she gets the money, but she can't control how much money she gets. So
yeah,
it's
so,
really a different story there. Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that we're not monitoring that, following that on other dashboards, but it's not part of her evaluation because it really isn't fair to evaluate her on things that she has no ability to control. Margaret Cox, you have your hand up. Go ahead, Board Member Cox.
Well, I just was wondering about the college-going graduates.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, about the college-going graduates.
Okay.
Remember in the budget, we're going to be cutting from, I don't know, what was it? 1.5 and 500,000 down to 500,000 in the budget. And then a lot of those, the percentage that we have are a lot of those kids that had early college, and on the budget that we were given, we effectively destroyed that whole program. So I'm just wondering, do we just leave it and go? I mean, 1% is small, but we may not even make what we have since we pretty much destroyed that whole project. Because 500,000 for the entire, all of the high schools, there's not very much money when they've had a whole lot more than that. So I'm concerned about that. And I brought that up once before when we talked about the budget, because it's being hit from a huge amount, from 2.5 to 500,000.
I agree. That's a devastating hit, and it affects the P20 initiative, certainly. But Superintendent, you have this in there, so what do you think?
The budget impact is actually for 21-22. The money for this year is intact and the programs are intact. So that metric makes sense for this school year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything? Okay, I see hands from Uemura, Board Member Uemura, Vice Chair Uemura, followed by Board Member Fallon.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Superintendent. That was that was a comment I was going to make. You said these targets are for the fiscal year 2021, and the cuts are for the biennium budgets going to 2022, 2023. So you're absolutely correct. So these plan indicators to me are okay for this coming fiscal year, but we may have to revisit that going into the 2022 fiscal years. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Uemura. Board Member Fallon.
I think that from a policy standpoint, the discussion around the metrics is critical to our ability to set priorities as a board, for the superintendent and her management team to set their priorities. So I just want to underscore that the metrics should be our guiding light, so to speak, in terms of how we're going to measure our success or gauge our success. And so when we're doing budgets or superintendent evaluation or setting priorities around the budget or development of a strategic plan, that all of those lead to metrics of some kind. So we're able to describe to the legislature, to the community, to our staff, what success looks like and how we're going to get there. And I think this is a really good discussion. So thank you, Chair, and everyone for having the discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Board Member Fallon. So I'm back to if we're going to amend the motion, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's consensus on removing the repair and maintenance backlog from the indicator list. And there is still some discussion on the 3% target for teacher retention. Board Member Voss pointed out that it might be too ambitious, and Superintendent proposed 2%, but other people said, no, we need to kind of hold that. So before we go any further, are there any comments regarding that particular metric, which was still kind of up in the air? Board Member Voss.
Well, I'll try to make this easy because I know the hour's getting late. I mean, I do agree with Ken that, on something as important as this, and it's been a priority for as long as I've been on the board, teacher retention. We shouldn't be looking back. We should be looking forward. The context of my question was just to make clear that this 3 percentage point increase on teacher retention I think is definitely a push goal this year, and I think it should stay in there, and we should amend to delete the repair and maintenance backlog, but recognize that the teacher retention increase for what it is.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. Superintendent, do you have any comments before we go further with the vote to amend and then to approve the package?
So I appreciate the comments on the teacher retention, the conversation on teacher retention. Whether it's 3% or 2% in an evaluation plan is more driven by the fact that the board has a percentage of metrics that you hold me to that have to be complete, that have to be met. And so my question back to the board is, with the notation made by Board Member Voss, are we talking about a footnote about the 3% remaining in there, but the acknowledgement that that metric may not calculate against the 80% that need to metrics that must be met this year? Because it's a design to these metrics to the percentage expectation to be met.
Yes, I think we don't want to set you up for failure here. So comments from board members? Are we willing to take the conditions into account when we do the final evaluation, given the circumstances of the pandemic? Board Member Bakarse.
Aloha, Board Member Bakarse here. Chair, I do think in not just this metric, but in all the metrics, this the situation is evolving, and hopefully it's evolving, not devolving. But I think the members understand that as we do evaluations, and all evaluations, we'll have to do it against the circumstances at that given time, and that has arisen throughout throughout the year. So I think we should leave it in at 3%, and I don't think we need to make a footnote about it. It's been discussed here, and I think we have common agreement that we will take that into consideration, most definitely, and also take other things into consideration that has not arisen yet. I yield.
Thank you, Board Member Bakarse. I think we have 100% of the board members here, so we are all hearing the conversation directly. If there are no other comments, and I'm scrolling for hands, I don't see any. If we're ready to move to the question, I will ask first for an amendment to the motion that removes the repair and maintenance backlog as an indicator on the targets for the superintendent. And Vice Chair Uemura.
Thank you, Chair Payne. Let me take a stab at this. I'm not sure I'm going to get it right, but I'd like to amend the motion to amend the strategic plan indicator targets by removing the repair and maintenance backlog from the targets.
Okay, Board Member Bakarse.
I second the motion.
So it has been moved and seconded that we delete repair and maintenance backlog indicator from the proposed targets for the superintendent on the strategic plan indicators. And I am going to call names and you will tell me your vote. Vice Chair Uemura.
Aye.
Board Member Asher.
Aye.
Board Member Bakarse.
Aye.
Board Member Cox.
Aye.
Board Member Fallon.
Aye.
Board Member Nama'u.
Aye.
Board Member Takeno.
Aye.
And Board Member Voss.
Aye.
Okay, so the amendment has been approved. So now we need to have a motion to approve the superintendent's priorities and the strategic plan indicator targets as amended. May I have that motion and a second? Oh, we have, yes, I need that new motion and a second. Board Member or Vice Chair Uemura.
Thank you, Chair Payne. I make the motion to approve the superintendent priorities and strategic plan indicator targets as amended.
Okay, may I have a second? Board Member Asher.
I second.
Thank you very much. I will call names again. Vice Chair Uemura.
Aye.
Board Member Asher.
Aye.
Board Member Bakarse.
Aye.
Board Member Cox.
Aye.
Board Member Fallon.
Aye.
Board Member Nama'u.
Aye.
Board Member Takeno.
Aye.
Board Member Voss.
Aye.
The motion has been approved. Thank you very much. And since there is no further business on the agenda, this meeting is adjourned as of 6:17 p.m. Thank you very much, everybody. We got a lot accomplished. Thank you to the staff of the board and the superintendent's team for being with us this whole time. Aloha, everyone. Merry Christmas and happy holidays for whatever you're celebrating.
Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas, everyone.